Everyone has a story of that one incident from their high school. The one they all remember. The time the sixth floor boys' bathroom was set on fire, the basement that's allegedly haunted by the death of a young boy, or what about the time a teacher got caught hooking up with several students? What about the principal who covered that up? Wouldn't it be crazy if all these incidents came from one high school? No, because today we're going to be doing a deep dive into my former high school, the many crimes that happened throughout its history, and all the funny bits in between.
Why do these students deserve to win?
Brooklyn Tech is the absolute best school on the planet. And anytime we have an opportunity to show everybody that nobody has more school spirit, we come out and we say things like Brooklyn Tech, Brooklyn Tech, Brooklyn Tech, Brooklyn Tech.
Jared, did you kill your mother?
You love her? Nah, I love her very much. She gave me everything.
22-year-old Jared Eng telling reporters he had nothing to do with the death of the very person who gave him life.
Students at Brooklyn Tech High School went to class today despite serious allegations against a teacher there. Last month, Sean Shaynak was charged for sending an explicit picture to a 16-year-old student. When he went to court, a bombshell awaited him. He was arrested again, indicted on 36 new charges.
In October of 1918, Dr. Albert L. Colston presented an answer for the modern technical school, needed after World War I, where many boys sought careers in the industrial field. After being given permission by the Brooklyn Engineers Club and the mayor, in September of 1922, Dr. Colston opened the doors of a repurposed warehouse to around 3,000 students, calling it Brooklyn Technical High School. By 1928, it became one of the premier schools to attend in Brooklyn, but they came across one small problem. By this point, they were annexing its 6,000 students off to different high schools, so plans were set for a new building near Fort Greene Park, one that needed over $6 million in funding, or just about $113 million in today's money. Costing nearly 2% of the city's total budget, it received a ton of pushback, but was still encouraged to be built by the acting mayor. Although the building had only finished 2 floors, it opened its doors in September of 1933, comprising of 800 students who sought careers in aviation, radio broadcasting, architecture, or the engineering field. It soon became the largest public high school in the United States, and that $6 million had not gone to waste, with multiple gyms being built, a huge swimming pool, a foundry on the 7th floor, an aerospace lab with a wind tunnel, a 420-foot radio tower, one of the largest auditoriums in New York City, a giant library, mock courtrooms, and an apartment on the 9th floor only used by the former founder, Dr. Colston. Nowadays, it's classified as a specialized high school, one of the best places to get your education in New York City, and kids fight for an opportunity to study there. It's a prestigious school. It houses some of the city's most brilliant minds. Notable alumni have gone on to win Nobel Prizes, they've founded companies like Barnes & Noble and GameStop, they've become elite guitarists, state senators, NASA astronauts, Olympic gold medalists, the Hulk, we had Talib Kweli, and now we're failed YouTubers. This video wasn't made to spite my former high school, the students there, or any of the current teachers, but rather to document the long history of incredibly strange things that have occurred between these walls. As a disclaimer, please don't harass anyone from tech. They're brilliant, hardworking students who are equally in the dark about all this as you are. So keep all the discussions here and in the comments below. From late 1922 to mid-1942, Dr. Colston led the way for a new generation of students focused on the growing technical field, gaining popularity through its in-house radio station and the advanced classrooms for the time. However, as you can expect, the safety of those students were not properly thought out. They were essentially raw-dogging these machines. Unfortunately, in March of 1938, while working on something in school, an accident occurred resulting in a student losing an eye, with fingers pointing to Dr. Colston and the teacher for being so careless. After coming across new evidence, they were eventually cleared from the accident, but the safety standards had yet to improve, with later yearbook photos proving that they stayed much the same. Another accident happened in August of 1965. While with his day camp, a 10-year-old boy named Carl Johnson drowned in the swimming pool. Now, there's often been a rumor associated with the basement, since that's where the pool was, that you'd often hear the wails of a crying boy in the changing room. It's unconfirmed, I've personally never heard it, but it's a ghost tale passed down from the decades before. The first recorded crime at Brooklyn Tech happened in October of 1939, when three people were caught looting $19,000 worth of cafeteria funds over the course of 2 years, receiving a 61-count indictment of grand larceny and forgery. By the early 1950s, Tech had modernized once again, this time implementing a college-style major system focused on paving an easier path towards a career. Under the new leadership of Principal William Pabst, Brooklyn Tech became one of the city's top three leading schools, alongside Stuyvesant and Bronx Science. However, they did introduce a controversial entrance exam for the students to pass in order to get in, which is still in use today. These schools sought the gifted, the ones who had something to prove, the ones who'd be otherwise wasted talent elsewhere, and through this exam was the one way to show it. As you can expect, I took it and I barely passed. I had to go through 2 years of SHSAT prep, after school tutoring, waking up early on weekend mornings to take like mock exams, and after all that, right, I just barely made it into Brooklyn Tech. That's a short way of saying this entrance exam was tough. Some people had an easier time than me, some didn't. But during the 1950s, going to these specialized schools meant you'd have a smoother transition into the working field. Even during those times, it was tough, and unfortunately, in July of 1954, a student was tragically found dead after failing the entrance exam. We'll get back to that, but as you can tell, these students worked hard. They were incredibly smart, incredibly talented, but they loved to cause mayhem. In May of 1970, someone set off a pipe bomb in the school bathroom, followed by lighting a Molotov in there. Remarkably, it was extinguished before anyone could get hurt. But that wouldn't be the last time someone messed around with chemicals in the laboratory. In November of 1985, more than 4,000 students were evacuated from the building after teachers found chemical explosives in both the basement and fourth floor of the school. They removed 4 canisters of chemicals containing picric acid, commonly used in the school lab, which, when left dried, leads to this.
Nå har jeg lige været inde og læse om det. Det er jo allergifremkaldende. Hold da kæft. Er du sindssyg, bum?
The tradition of blowing shit up at Brooklyn Tech never quite ended, when in November of 2006, a student filled up a water bottle with various chemicals that exploded in the fourth floor staircase, resulting in 4 students going to the hospital with no major injuries. It was deemed a bad prank, and that student was charged with reckless endangerment and a suspension from the school. By the way, here's what our fire drills used to look like: 6,000 students flooding the streets all at once. And boy, do we love our fires. Our school has gone viral a few times. I'll dive more into that further on. But the amount of times we set our toilets on fire is quite a lot, actually, with it becoming a tradition that I do not suggest doing. In November of 2003, 3 fires broke out at Brooklyn Tech, one in a second floor classroom, the other in the 7th floor janitor's room, and the last in the 4th floor boys' bathroom. This came after 3 other fires from the week prior, with the police suspecting one individual being behind all this. Thankfully, no one was injured, but parents became increasingly concerned with the amount of fires happening. In February of 2013, someone set the toilet on fire once again, but this time, it went viral on both Reddit and Facebook, with Redditors sharing comments about how dumb our school really was. Interestingly enough, 2 more toilets in our bathroom were also set on fire the year before. One was even ripped out. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Just wait until we get to the real bathroom section. In April of 2013, another similar situation happened where thousands had to evacuate the building when someone set the 6th floor boys' bathroom on fire. The hallways were filled with smoke, with about 60 firefighters having to come in to quell the fire in under an hour. The student who lit the fire was arrested. No one was injured, but they did have to go back to class regardless. What's interesting about this is that the 6th floor boys' bathroom was made unavailable to us for the next few years, only coming back during my senior year there. Allegedly, someone set off a smoke bomb in the 8th floor boys' bathroom a day earlier, and with all this happening at once, the page "I survived the April 17, 2013 Brooklyn Tech fire" was made. Keeping up with traditions, in December of 2022, a fire broke out in the 2nd floor gender-neutral bathroom, with smoke billowing in the hallways right after. The students remained confused, ironically going through a fire drill 2 periods before the real fire. And it didn't help that Principal Newman was giving contradictory statements. The fire spread from inside a garbage can, which wasn't even the first time that's happened, but the second floor was closed off for the remainder of the day, as students continued classes inside the smoke filled halls. When summarized by a Brooklyn Tech student, all they had to say was, the writers are getting lazy and reusing plot lines from 2003. On top of the students constantly setting the toilets on fire, our school received a ton of bomb threats. I remember personally being evacuated during 2 of them. In January of 2013, a bomb threat was called in, resulting in all the students evacuating and being sent home early. The police thoroughly searched the building, finding nothing inside and deeming this all a hoax. During my time there, 2 bomb threats were called in. I remember the SWAT team showing up right before I had physics, but I couldn't find any articles about them. However, in December of 2019, the school received a threatening email concerning an armed gunman who might have planted a bomb inside that'll go off later in the day. Most of the students hadn't yet arrived at school, waiting out in the freezing temperature by Fort Greene Park, but some were redirected towards Long Island University in attempts to stay warm. Most students were unhappy with the way the situation was handled, being left in the dark while wandering around for 2 hours. Some students decided to cut, but most stayed. Tech students don't like to miss class. After a thorough investigation was done by the K-9 team, everyone was shortly let back in and classes proceeded to resume. The police classified this threat as another hoax, but they did mention that whoever did it had a pattern of doing it, evidenced by a unique hashtag used in previous bomb spoofs. But don't let these chemical flame-wielding bomb squad nerds fool you. When grouped together, they can become quite dangerous. By the mid-1980s, a group of teens from Brooklyn Tech and Bushwick High School bonded to form the Decepticons, becoming quite infamous for terrorizing the neighborhoods of Bed-Stuy all the way to East Flatbush, with a racking up a large member count, including the rappers Tech and Steel, Dallas Penn of the Combat Show, Freedro Star and Moesha, and the Decepticons have even been referenced on Jay-Z's BK anthem.
But the majority was, a few of the brothers went to Brooklyn Tech, excuse me.
Okay.
You had Rumble, Psy, I think Rumble and Psy went to Bushwick. I think Rick, and you know him as Megatron.
Okay.
Went to Tech. So Rick was mingling with all these other kind of smart gangsters from the
Yeah, because to be in Brooklyn Tech, you had to be smart.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You
gotta take a test to get in.
I took a test to be in Brooklyn Tech.
Okay, yeah.
I didn't get in.
Yeah.
by no means, I didn't get in. I took a test to be in art design. I didn't get in there either. I can draw and all that. I've seen niggas drawing some
Brooklyn
shit.
Tech, art design.
None of that. Yeah, all the smart schools, but you had to be there, right? For some weird reason, all of these places became the cannon fodder for us to develop our manly prowess in them fields.
Street organizations.
Hey, give it a name.
Yeah.
The lowlifes refer to a Brooklyn-based movement where young teens would often dress themselves in polo head to toe, but they'd all come from either shoplifting or robbing someone of theirs. It wasn't necessarily a gang, but more of a subculture that eventually led to the overall embrace of Ralph Lauren in the hip-hop genre. For the purposes of this video, just know that some Decepticons were also lowlifes.
All y'all little niggas out there watching this shit right here, we still here. Ask your mama, ask your daddy, ask your aunt, ask your uncle. If you don't know, nigga, if you under motherfucking 25 and you under a rock some motherfucker where, ask them about Decept. They gonna tell you, we ran this concrete motherfucking jungle and we about to run it again.
Yeah, I'm from Fort Greene. I'm from Fort Greene. I'm from Fort Greene. Yeah.
If you're wondering where the name Decepticon comes from, yep, you'd be correct in thinking so. The gang was notorious for robbing students and invading other schools, leading to a fear of them throughout Brooklyn and Manhattan. Throughout its short history, only lasting until the mid-2000s, they were known, they were everywhere, and they set a fear of violence throughout the city.
When I got into high school, they started talking about this. Like, yo, the Decepticons, you know what I'm saying? They out here wilding, this, that, and the third, yada, yada, like Decepticons. Like, man, huh? It's a freaking cartoon, you know what I'm saying? Yo, and then boom. Then all of a sudden they had the Transformers and them two was fighting each other. But then it just got real wild. So one day, next thing you know, these dudes get on the train. Yo, and I'm looking, because I'm at the last car. It's like 10 cars. And I'm looking down like 2 cars down, you know what I'm saying? Because I'm standing up. You know, I'm at the back window. and I see them, and I'm like, it's like real small, and I see, it's, you know, I see them doing something. I couldn't really tell, but it looked kind of wild. And then when they got to the ninth car, yo, I seen dudes just stealing on people. You know what I'm saying? Just bang, bang. You know what I'm saying? Dead arming dudes and taking, just snatching. You know what I'm saying? Taking all their jewels, whatever, if you had it on. But
The Decepticons were notorious for carrying around hammers, baseball bats, razors, and box cutters, with often a dozen members patrolling at once. They were rarely seen active outside of school days. They'd ride the subway together, wait for the right moment, and they'd often rob 10 to 15 people at once, taking gold chains, Walkmans, and whatever else was valuable. They'd monitor high school sidewalks looking for freshmen that looked scared, and they'd surround them, jump them, rob them of what they had, but according to some rumors, they did have an exclusive secret code. If you were to say, "What's the flavor?" they'd let you off without the beating.
None of that.
What they used to ask you, what's the flavor, right?
What's the flavor?
Yeah, and you yeah.
So a lot of times, you know, you get charged for that. You get checked for that in this world. Like, you know, it's a different flex.
And
Cited as having around 60 members, it was led by Megatron, a student of Brooklyn Tech who recruited others by having them be jumped into the gang. Fort Greene acted as their base of operations, with the park gaining an infamous reputation for students getting mugged, even up until my freshman year.
On purpose, right? It should have been Brooklyn Tech. Brooklyn Tech should have been the headquarters because Brooklyn Tech is BTA.
Okay.
You know what I mean? That's battle training ground right there. So you, like, in the early days, you would go to Brooklyn Tech and you would go down in the playground. You got to go downstairs. No playground in the world in New York, right? You go down in the playground and you fight a bunch of cats. And if you can get out that, then, you know, cats will make a... Yeah, I know exactly.
Nicknamed the Decepts, they adopted the purple Decepticon logo but chose to avoid showing colors, rather deciding to blend in with other teenagers as to not arouse suspicion. However, when they were together, they were hard to miss, often shutting down neighborhoods or streets as popular as Times Square.
DCEP couldn't wear no colors. Like, we had drama.
Yeah.
We had drama. We was shopping with our moms. We was going to church.
Shit.
We was going to movies.
And it was happening anywhere.
We could not wear colors. Word. So it's not like you could not go around. You couldn't go to Sunrise.
You couldn't say I was DCEP.
And be like, nah, it was not.
The Deceptionettes were the female counterparts, and just as bad as the guys. These girls were equally violent, often beating people with baseball bats while wearing the same polo gear the Decepticons were wearing. They were similarly jumped in, but they also had to perform a sex-in, often at the young ages of 10 to 12, and by multiple different men in the same night. One of these Deceptionettes, Isis Sapp Grant, has made it her life mission to ward off young girls looking to join a gang. She started multiple projects to help reduce the number of young women going to jail, using her experience and qualifications as a social worker to do so. She recalls playing one-punch knockout with strangers, then robbing them of their clothing and jewelry. But after her first arrest, she made the choice to attend college, get a master's degree, and now focuses on helping other women develop useful skills for the workforce. By the mid-2000s, Decepticons had become a faint memory, a legend of sorts, but they were never forgotten. They were ingrained into the minds of students from the 80s. Deans often led assemblies warning students about how to protect themselves from these gangs. They were headlined on the New York Times, and they've even become successful actors, rappers, and cultural influencers.
After we won at the Soul Train Awards, we did the first annual Source Awards. But they didn't show us any love. We got nominated for a few awards, but we didn't win anything. So I shot it up, literally, on stage while performing Throw Your Guns.
Hey yo, when we got real niggas in here, you throw your fucking guns in the air.
Talib Kweli, who attended Brooklyn Tech back in the early 90s, remembers them being violent, even interviewing Decepticon member Rockness Monster on an episode of The People's Party.
Don't know that if you get the information incorrect, niggas is gonna beat you up.
Right.
Like, I couldn't get behind that right there. I just couldn't. Sounded a lot like slavery to me. Like, you understand what I'm saying? Like, you do something wrong, you get whooped on. Like,
And I had some similar experiences running around 5% circles.
It's like a
in Brooklyn.
fraternity.
Right. So I
Yeah.
ended up joining a real gang. You understand what I'm saying?
So if I'm being a gang,
Like, if I'm being a gang, I would be in a gang.
To say Brooklyn Tech was violent in the 80s would be quite an understatement. Not only were there gangs, chemical explosives, and the occasional missing eye, but the classrooms themselves became unsafe. In May of 1982, at around 1:40 p.m., 4 gunmen robbed 21 students in a classroom on the 4th floor, taking an estimated $700 in jewelry, most of which came from one girl. The thieves were untrained, most likely teens themselves. 2 guarded the outside, 1 held a gun, and the other nervously collected the valuables. All the students were left unharmed, and if it wasn't for the English teacher, who knows what would have happened. After the robbery, they were spotted on the 7th floor, the cafeteria, proceeding to throw something towards the teacher and then fleeing the building. With all the security we had and the various entrances, combined with the teens having an already established knowledge of the building, it wasn't hard to suspect that they'd be students of Brooklyn Tech. And they were. On June 1st of 1982, all 4 were arrested, all of whom attended Brooklyn Tech. They were charged with first-degree robbery, possession of stolen property, and possession of a deadly weapon. In October of 1983, while on their way home from school, 6 students were approached by 10 others, with an argument quickly ensuing between the 2 groups over a pair of sunglasses, resulting in a fight breaking out and one student being stabbed in the stomach while 2 others were injured. Sadly, the student who was stabbed succumbed to his wounds at the hospital, leading to the arrest of Tito Valles on the charges of murder and possession of a deadly weapon.
Now, I do want to. From my generation, when I was growing up, Brooklyn Tech. I knew it as a specialized school for the gifted and talented. However, there was also a dark side to it. Things with a negative connotation. I mean, where specifically where the school is in a more dangerous neighborhood. During that time, now it's nice. It's like coffee shops and wine bars and cheese, artisanal cheese and all that stuff around here. But during 20 years ago, it wasn't like that. There was gangs were rampant here, and I remember Brooklyn Tech having so many fights and beefs and going on during that time 20 years ago. Was it like that in the 60s as well?
Well, back in the day, they said what? Fort Greene, lean and mean. Bed-Stuy, do or die. So, there's a lot of beefs around here, but really didn't involve us, us high school, Chinese school kids, because, we finished classes, we got on the subway, we went home. Mm-hmm. We're not hanging out here in Fort Greene like till 9, 10 o'clock or whatever, looking for trouble.
Right.
So.
In March of 1985, while talking to her student in the stairwell about a dispute, Susan Tron, a teacher at Brooklyn Tech, was stabbed by a 16-year-old Roy Green. Remarkably, she walked to the nearby hospital and was reported to be in stable condition. As for Roy Green, he was arrested soon after, but in November of 1996, he was convicted of first-degree sexual abuse, placed in prison, and his motion to leave in March of 2020 was denied by the court. In April of 1986, 17-year-old Brooklyn Tech student Sulat Bunyam was visiting his friend David Chow, both of whom were computer nerds, often trading games and equipment with each other since the 3rd grade. After an argument about an $85 printer, Bunyam stabbed David 4 times, bludgeoning him with a hammer, and then leaving him locked up in his own room for David's family to later discover. It wasn't unusual for David to be cooped up in his room playing computer games all day, but after 24 hours, the family became suspicious. After noticing the money she left for her son on the kitchen counter, Miss Chow forcibly broke down his door, being shocked to see that her son was murdered in their own home. But it wasn't long until Bunyam was caught. Allegedly, the dispute was over money owed to Bunyam, and his lawyers argued that the knife originally belonged to David, with all of this being an act of self-defense. However, that doesn't quite explain why he needed to use a hammer after stabbing David 4 times, or why he never went to the police afterwards. David Chow is remembered as a nice kid who loved playing video games and had a knack for computers. His future was bright, unlike Bunyam, who had his house foreclosed on in July of 2019. In November of 1993, while teaching his math class, Evan Waxhaw heard a knock at the door. Suddenly, three mass intruders burst in and proceeded to beat down Mr. Waxhaw, only to be run off by two other students. It's unclear whether or not the intruders were students, but strangely, nothing was taken. However, Mr. Waxhaw did suffer injuries that were treated at the hospital shortly after. You'd think that'd be the last of it, but no. We're only halfway through the robbery section. Now, this next one is pretty convoluted, having multiple moving parts all going at once. So, to start off, on March 21st of 2000, two robberies took place in both the fourth floor boys' bathroom and the northeast staircase. In the boys' bathroom, three students held up another at knife point, stunning him 4 times, but they only managed to get about $8 and a gold chain from this. Similarly, three other students were robbed in the stairwell. But here's where the case got messy. One of the deans, Enrique Rodriguez, kept hindering the prosecution by withholding names, not giving full context, and even letting some of the perpetrators escape. Mr. Rodriguez never actually went to the police, nor did the other deans, or the school safety officer, with it all being coincidental that this case was ever found. To put it bluntly, Mr. Rodriguez put the reputation of the school over the safety of its students, with the assailants being free to go back to class. In September of that year, another dean failed to report an unarmed robbery in the school. So, with all this, an investigation was opened up by Ed Stancic, with a 35-page report on it available online. To give you the summary, witnesses were questioned by the deans, who withheld that information from the police, and it was only by coincidence that this was ever reported, with a police officer happening to walk by Mr. Rodriguez's office at the right time. The perps went to trial. They all got superintendent suspensions, with two of them gaining a felony and being sentenced to probation. This next one is a little bit strange, but in January of 2003, an 18-year-old Shiva Sharma was stealing the online identities of up to 100 people, getting away with more than $10,000 worth of purchases. He'd fish unaware victims online, gaining their trust, and stealing their information, having no regret about it whatsoever. Remarkably, he was the first person to have ever been charged with online identity theft in New York City. By the age of 20, he'd been arrested 3 times for identity theft, taking well over $150,000 this time around. To him, it became an addiction. He'd been stealing online identities since 2002, when he was still a senior at Brooklyn Tech. What's even more interesting is that he was the class valedictorian, having to do his graduation at Rikers Island. Going under the alias Sniper5984, he bragged about wiring money through the accounts of his victims, choosing to spend it on luxury cars and not on his wife or 1-year-old daughter. He had no justification for doing what he did. He knew it was wrong, but it became too easy for him, and hard to stop. In November of 2002, he was arrested for ordering a photo ID printer under a stolen credit card, but he was never jailed for that. Over the course of the next year, he was being investigated by postal workers, and they finally caught on to his scheme in May of 2003, where he was arrested for another charge of identity theft, only being sentenced to 5 years of probation in November of that year. Undeterred by his arrests, he continued scamming victims online, but only this time, he was spending as much money as he made, living off hotels and luxury items. In October of 2004, he was arrested in the same exact sting operation as the first time, thankfully being sentenced to 4 years in prison. Even after his multiple arrests and jail time, it seems like he still hadn't learned his lesson. His family had left him for Florida, his wife thought computers are the devil, and sadly, this wasn't the end of his story. In May of 2016, while in his 2004 Nissan Altima, Shiva Sharma was speeding down 6th Ave, jumping a curb, and then hitting a fire hydrant, which tore his car in half. Instantly, the passenger of his car, Juan Avilo, was killed, while Shiva was taken to a hospital to undergo surgery. Investigators later determined Shiva was drunk at the time of the accident, resulting in him being arrested on charges of vehicular manslaughter. Sources claim Shiva received a sentence of either 5.5 years or 11, which he received in August of 2019. Not surprisingly, he was also charged with forging a document and identity theft, adding an extra 2 to 4 years to his sentencing. In September of 2008, two students at Brooklyn Tech threatened and mugged another with a screwdriver, managing to take their phone. Foolishly, one of these students decided to make a call. Then they threw the phone down the stairs and then ran out the building, soon being apprehended by the police. With all these robberies going around, you'd think Brooklyn Tech would at least address it. And to their credit, they did, but in the worst way possible. They made an announcement. They obviously knew their students were getting beaten up, but they gave no comfort, no solution, and told students not to be hanging out in the park. The one literally right next to the school. Bro, you could look out the window and see it. We were always told to stay far away from it. Now, funny story, but during my freshman year, my gym teacher mentioned how they stopped doing track there solely because the students kept getting mugged. By September of 2010, Fort Greene became a hotbed for crime, resulting in about 8 robberies that month. The police suspected the students of Brooklyn Tech as being responsible, since 3 of them were apprehended that month for a string of robberies. Although, it wasn't as bad as the 1990s, when about 4 robberies happened daily throughout Clinton Hill. Besides getting robbed inside and outside of the school, you can be held up at knife point on your way to the train, as was done to a 14-year-old freshman in May of 2012. The assailant was only able to get away with $10, before running off and fleeing. Not only have the students been robbed, but the school itself was broken into. In August of 2013, a man was able to gain entry through an open basement window, then started making his way towards the dean's office. Surveillance cameras show the man stealing computers, iPads, laptops, and even personal items stored inside the lockers. The thief broke in twice, one at 3 a.m. and then 2 days later at around 4:30 a.m. The man was later arrested, but most of the stolen goods were never located or returned, with taxpayers having to pay the price for it. Most of the students grew concerned about our school security system, feeling unsafe and worried about potential harm. Now, during my time there, I will say they upped their security, but sometime around my junior year, a homeless man ran through the front entrance and locked himself in our first floor bathroom. Our school was under lockdown for almost 2 hours, we were given no context, and rumors spread during that time that the man had a gun, but that was never confirmed. However, the safety priorities of our school was ultimately a joke. Besides the usual fires that spread in our bathrooms and the constant fear of being robbed, we had people selling BB guns in school for $5 apiece. Now, in order to use the elevators, you need a key, which students somehow got access to, selling them for almost 3 times the price of the BB gun. During a school safety meeting, our school promoted an anti-Semitic, anti-homosexual, and anti-abortion hate group. But don't worry, if you choose to attend, undercover cops will make sure you're safe. But you gotta wonder, why are they undercover?
How you feel about this, boy?
Yeah, shit was stupid. I don't know why they came out here. Like, there are 6 people against, like, what? How many niggas was there? Like, 200?
And they're from Kansas. They took a plane here, folks.
That was a waste of time on my plane.
Waste of money. We're in a recession. You can't be wasting money like that.
I think you get the point. The nerds are robbing each other, and other people are robbing those nerds. Although it might seem like you'll be robbed on your first day there, that's not really the case. The locker room is really the only place that's unsafe for your belongings. Besides that, it's mostly calm. There's no active gangs, security's been beefed up, and most of us are there to just get an education. One question that immediately arises is, who is teaching these children? The students at Brooklyn Tech are exceptionally gifted, and for 99% of it, the teachers are too. Our standard workload rivaled those of college students, so you can imagine that most teachers were more than qualified for their positions. But that doesn't mean our teachers were impervious to crime. Starting off small, in October of 2008, our former librarian, Mr. Grant, was setting up tables displaying Shakespeare's Macbeth. However, this was a manga version illustrated by his daughter. To anyone who was interested, he was practically giving them out for free. It was part of his job. But more so, he was just proud of his daughter. Unfortunately, that pride would send him on his way to the assistant principal's office. For the crime of being a proud father and encouraging students to read, the Internal Conflicts Board informed him that he could be losing his job. But that wasn't all. He was fined $500 and was told to write a 3-page violation report acknowledging his mistakes, which was later posted online. The royalties would have amounted to less than $5, with students and teachers alike calling this ruling unfair. Mr. Grant took down each and every one of the Macbeth mangas from the library, but if you still want to support his daughter, it's available on Amazon. There's a deeper connection between Brooklyn Tech and Shakespeare that's a bit darker. To understand, you gotta realize that this isn't the first time someone's spoken up about the wrongdoings at Brooklyn Tech. Rather, it's a culmination of what others had to say. There's a website called BTHS Survivors that was made by a former student, Scott Schubert, who sought to expose the corruption led by our former principal, Dr. Lee McCaskill. In the late 1980s, Dr. Lee McCaskill was appointed assistant principal, and with that came an era of dishonesty. Did you notice how I mentioned less criminal reports in the 1990s, even though most graduates argued that this was a peak of violence? It's because of Principal McCaskill. He valued the reputation of our school more than the crucial problems going on inside of it, with many teachers either retiring or changing schools under his reign. In January of 1989, a 13-year-old girl was assaulted by a 15-year-old boy, who chased her down a stairwell and made disgusting threats towards her. She screamed. She was watched on by other boys at the school, who disgustingly agreed with the threats. The boy tore off her clothes, continued to fondle her, but thankfully, she escaped into the dean's room and filed a police report. She just went through a nightmare scenario, had no help, she'd been traumatized, but her parents reassured her that she'd now be safe considering that the abuser had been arrested. Except, that wasn't the case, as due to some error by the Board of Education, she saw him right back in class the day after their court hearing. Dr. McCaskill readmitted this fucking psychopath, confirming that something in the paperwork was missing. They had the dean's report, the arrest record, the court hearing, but yet, he was still given grace, having his suspension hearing be postponed 3 different times. Eventually, a spokesman for the board rectified their mistake, transferring him into an alternative school, but all that failed to please her parents, who had by this point lost faith in the system. In 1992, Dr. McCaskill was officially appointed principal of Brooklyn Tech, to the dismay of many others. Within his first year, he hired a convicted felon as a substitute biology teacher. Mr. Lim had previously been arrested for falsifying Medicaid records, which the Board of Education knew about, but chose not to reveal as it didn't hinder his teaching abilities. It's a relatively gray situation. He was a non-violent felon, but he didn't disclose that during his interview, nor any time after. Following the reveal, Mr. Lim was removed from his position at Brooklyn Tech, with board members arguing both in favor and against his policy. Dr. McCaskill neglected his duties as a responsible principal, with students often complaining about how disgusting the bathrooms were, how they were treated like prisoners, how poor the lunch quality was, and all those unreported muggings? Well, that was on Dr. McCaskill. In March of 2000, a teacher named Charles Massara had collected up to $5,000 from various students in order to invest in the stock market, particularly for advanced tissue sciences, which had jumped in prices that month. Mr. Massara was their teacher, they trusted him, so the kids handed over their money and tracked the ATS stock over the next few months. However, Mr. Massara never once provided any documentation for purchasing said stock, claiming to have kept that money in a locker somewhere. By the time June came around, students were looking to reclaim their investment money, but Mr. Massara constantly came up with excuses, before telling his students one by one that the money was stolen and that they wouldn't be receiving any of it back. None of this was allowed. You can't just collect money from your students without the school's permission, especially not for some volatile stock from a company that was going bankrupt. Dr. McCaskill had no idea this was going on, and he reassigned Mr. Massara to a different school in Staten Island, where he received no accountability for his part in scamming his own students. On the bright side, the Board of Education promised to repay all the students who lost their money in Mr. Massara's scam. But he wasn't our only scammer. In May of 2001, Dr. McCaskill assigned school aide Maria Cartagena to sell $1 soft pretzels in order to help fund the printing costs needed for our school magazine. Throughout this fundraiser, they managed to make over $5,000. But when a school audit took place, they realized Maria had stashed away that money, resulting in her being arrested on charges of grand larceny. This was a huge blow to our funding, especially for the students of the school magazine who work hard to get these out every year. Maria was shortly fired, being replaced by Juanita, the legendary lunch aide we'd all come to love. Dr. McCaskill ruled Brooklyn Tech through fear and intimidation, often using censorship as a means of control. He kept a tight grip on the school newspaper, constantly shifting through different faculty members and rejecting most student articles that seemed fine to other teachers. In June of 2002, he destroyed all 4,000 final copies of the survey, blaming it on grammatical errors, but others argued that he was just trying to censor criticism brought up against the school. Previously, in April of that year, he canceled a trip to a national robotics championship an hour before the students were set to go, blaming it on the assistant principal, all while knowing we have a robotics team that competes every year. Similar to the school magazine, our chess team had to run bake sales for its fundraising, making just enough to go to the national championships in Kentucky. However, Dr. McCaskill would not let them go, regardless of a chaperone being there, saying he didn't want students to miss 3 days of school. For established teams, our school usually funds them all the way through, but when the debate team headed to the state championships, the students unfortunately had to pay for the hotel room out of pocket. Dr. McCaskill never compensated these students for his negligence, so one of the parents had to go to the superintendent's office in order to recoup the money. Back to the censorship, in June of 2002, Todd Friedman, a veteran English teacher, assigned the Pulitzer Prize-winning book, Continental Drift, for his students to read, intending for them to learn more about the effects of globalization and institutionalized racism. One disgruntled parent, a very close friend of Dr. McCaskill's, deemed this novel not safe for school, going straight to his office and filing a formal complaint, in which Dr. McCaskill, along with the superintendent, both agreed that this award-winning book was inappropriate. Dr. McCaskill threatened Mr. Friedman with possible disciplinary action, even though this book was already under the school's summer reading list. Mr. Friedman appealed it, but here's where the corruption starts to take place. The school superintendent, Mr. Irizarry, always sided with Dr. McCaskill no matter what. No matter how many people petitioned against it, no matter how much the odds were stacked against them, it didn't even matter that this was a violation of the First Amendment. They were simply partners in crime. Dr. McCaskill gave him no real options, removing Continental Drift from the curriculum and allowing assistant principal, Miss Tracy Atkins, to choose the new books. After twice emailing the chancellor, Mr. Friedman was finally able to plead his case, and in May of 2003, the Board of Education rescinded the violation, allowing him to teach Continental Drift once again. Mr. Friedman knew that if he stayed at Brooklyn Tech, they would make his life miserable, so in January of 2004, he along with 25% of the English department left the school, citing Dr. McCaskill as a primary reason why. Prior to this, 3 other teachers left for the exact same reason, with all of them saying they couldn't bear working for Dr. McCaskill any longer. It's alleged that the assistant principal, Miss Tracy Atkins, was extremely misogynistic, homophobic, and anti-Semitic, only being enabled by Dr. McCaskill. You remember how Continental Drift had sexually explicit texts? Well, Miss Atkins replaced it with the book Secrets, which had vivid imagery of underage stuff and a man fornicating with a cow. When brought to Dr. McCaskill's attention, he defended this, saying it was already in the school library, the same place where you could find Continental Drift. Miss Atkins then assigned the controversial poem Somebody Blew Up America, which claimed Israelis had advanced knowledge of 9/11. She was emotionally abusive to her staff. She harassed 4 pregnant teachers for no apparent reason, asked them to spy on each other, and wanting to discuss their sex lives. Some teachers argued that Miss Atkins was worse than Dr. McCaskill. She'd often instigate drama between them, causing their morale to go down. Dr. McCaskill assigned Miss Atkins to audit teachers based on their class performance, but she abused her power, usually handing out unsatisfactory reports without any concise observations. In early June of 2005, award-winning teacher Miss Roberta Lerman criticized the school in an unpublished article, and a week later, she was handed an unsatisfactory grade for the year, even though she had done nothing wrong. Over the following year, Miss Atkins handed out numerous unsatisfactory reports, usually to teachers who criticized them in articles. These teachers would get chastised, they'd be stripped of opportunities and valuable class time. Miss Atkins usually sided with the students, telling a veteran English teacher to stop grading students on the quality of their writing unless he had personally taught them how to write. Both Tracy Atkins and Dr. McCaskill were anti intellectuals, relishing in the fact that they could harass teachers with total impunity. They'd brag about writing unsatisfactory reports, they'd write teachers up for being too loud, they'd pretend to be your friend only to backstab you later on. They were both megalomaniacs to say the least. It's the death of a thousand cuts, and their full list of criticisms far exceeds what I want to talk about in this video. So I want to end it with this. As the teacher was preparing to clear out her desk, Dr. McCaskill called the police to escort her out the building. They're genuinely disrespectful for no reason. They use fascist tactics to censor their critics and would then abuse their authority over them. In June of 2008, Miss Atkins would officially step down from her position as assistant principal, transferring to LaGuardia High School as a talent coach, where teachers say they were shitting bricks around her and that she is a huge anti-Semite. In April of 2005, a series of events occurred that unfortunately resulted in a teacher taking their own life. Substitute teacher Evan Gordon was accused of embezzling $2,000 from the school magazine by both Dr. McCaskill and Miss Tracy Atkins, but they never once provided how. Other teachers believed that the accusations were unfounded, and when he went to confront Miss Atkins, the fascist dictator Dr. McCaskill sent the guards after him, escorting Mr. Gordon out of the building. The Department of Education themselves dismissed this case as unsubstantiated, but he never got a call back for a substitute teaching position. Mr. Gordon believed Miss Atkins was out to get him, insisting that he cover a full teaching lesson for classes that he may not even see again. She cost him his job, then allegedly told the program director, Jeffrey Harris, to not have him rehired. In a fit of rage, Mr. Gordon contacted Mr. Harris dozens of times throughout July of 2005, resulting in him getting arrested and spending one night in jail. According to Miss O'Brien, his former girlfriend and a teacher at Brooklyn Tech, he was bipolar, often taking valproic acid for his manic depression. After getting off his medication for a while, he experienced mood swings and was found laying on his bed in a coma. He died from an overdose 2 days later and is remembered by fellow staff and former students as a genuinely good guy. Do I believe Dr. McCaskill and Miss Atkins had a hand in Mr. Gordon's eventual overdose? Maybe. I think they're genuinely evil people, evidenced by when another teacher asked permission to attend Mr. Gordon's funeral, but was denied. Ironically, Dr. McCaskill said there weren't enough substitute teachers to cover, but Mr. Silverman went anyway. It's said that Dr. McCaskill held a grudge against Mr. Silverman due to him being one of the teachers who spoke up. For the crime of attending his friend's funeral, Mr. Silverman received a formal letter of reprimand, written personally by Dr. McCaskill. Now here's where things get a little weird. In a New York Times article from October of 2002, 3 teachers came forward accusing Dr. McCaskill of sending explicit emails from his school computer, starting all the way from the year of 1998. According to one of these teachers, he would send sexually explicit jokes along with ethnically insensitive messages, further enabling his students to do the same. Former teachers recall receiving up to 100 emails over a 15-month time period, often getting up to 4 a day, with Dr. McCaskill sometimes asking them for a reaction. Most teachers were unamused, finding this inappropriate and a waste of time, so 3 of them officially went public with the news but never filed a formal complaint. Upon digging further, 9 allegations were filed against him since 1995, including verbal harassment, playing favorites, and canceling academic programs in order to spite teachers. Dr. McCaskill offered up the explanation that he was hacked a month prior to the initial investigations. But that seems sketchy since we know the emails date back to 1998. This was 2002. When this news broke out, Dr. McCaskill spent the next 2 days informing the seniors that what they were seeing was actually fake news, but he was criticized by other teachers for wasting class time. In December of 2002, one of the teachers that came forward about the emails told the Daily News that Dr. McCaskill had been harassing her since the publication of that New York Times article. English teacher Alice Alcala revealed that she was being dragged away from her other duties, and was criticized for calling 911 when a student suffered an asthma attack. Her class was being audited by Miss Atkins, who gave her first unsatisfactory evaluation that she ever received in her 28 years of teaching. They were definitely trying to make her life miserable. Miss Alcala was one of the city's leading Shakespearean teachers, a role model for others. She even won a $10,000 grant for our school, deciding to put on the play The Taming of the Shrew with her students. Dr. McCaskill canceled the entire Shakespeare program the year after, and there hasn't been a course for that ever since. All this despite one teacher who came forward about the sexually explicit emails. Miss Alcala caught a break though. She transferred over to a different high school who recognized her talents. She won another grant and was finally able to put on more Shakespearean plays, inspiring others at her new school to do the same. In March of 2003, Dr. McCaskill was officially cleared of any wrongdoings pertaining to the sexually inappropriate emails he had sent the year prior, with investigators believing he must have been hacked. They believe Dr. McCaskill was the victim of a smear campaign, and unsurprisingly, this investigation was led by Mr. Arizari, the school superintendent, who was also a close friend of Dr. McCaskill's. Dr. McCaskill had earned himself praise from his higher-ups, who claimed he'd done a lot of good for that school. Now listen, a teacher once obtained $10,000 in grant money to reintroduce our school's radio program, but that equipment, 32 computers, were left unused due to Dr. McCaskill never hiring anyone to set up the proper electrical outlets needed for them. $10,000 wasted because he wanted to play dumbass. But yeah, according to the deputy chancellor, he's done a lot of good. He kept getting away with it. Until he didn't. In February of 2006, an internal investigation took place revealing that Dr. McCaskill had illegally enrolled his daughter into a New York elementary school while they lived in New Jersey. In order to enroll his daughter, Dr. McCaskill forged documents that gave a false Brooklyn address, belonging to his close family friend who, by the way, was a lawyer. It wasn't a well-kept secret. The teachers knew, the chancellor knew, and now everyone who read the New York Times knew. When questioned, he gave contradictory statements and further misled the investigation by showing them a lease with false information. When they began investigating his wife, she gave them a slightly different testimony. The lawyer who signed those fake leases was also questioned, but she was referred to the state's ethics commission. The investigators were hot on his trail. They were surveilling him, he lied under oath, his leases dated back to 2001 when they were actually from 2004. The lawyer actively falsified documents, that's gotta be illegal, right? This was no accident. It was definitely planned by them, and they had the intention of stealing taxpayer money for their own gain. Furthermore, the investigators recommended that Dr. McCaskill's wife, Kathy, be dismissed from her position as a teacher for the same reasons stated before. Kathy was as guilty as her husband, providing a flight itinerary as a means to show proof of her Brooklyn address. The school was more than ready to move on, and they were not looking back. From the eyes of the teachers, they were buzzing with excitement, high-fiving and hugging each other in the hallways, and to quote, "What's so amazing to me is that what seems to have brought him down is the thing at PS 29. With all this political turmoil, and then thinking he could get away with sending his kid to a school in Brooklyn." Here's where the Board of Education kinda messed up. Instead of firing him, he was allowed to retire, meaning he could take up another teaching opportunity elsewhere. For all his actions, for all crimes against humanity, he paid a measly $19,000 to the city for his daughter's tuition, which, when taken out of his vacation pay of $125,000, meant practically nothing. Oh, and guess what? That lawyer, Robin Shears, who lied during most of her testimony, was also massively corrupt. She mostly favored black fathers over their mothers, even in cases where it didn't make much sense. At one point, she was deemed unfit to serve as a judge by a whole screening panel. But that didn't seem to stop her from now working as an official judge at Kings County Supreme Court. Following this, in June of 2006, another bombshell dropped when it was discovered that Dr. McCaskill was pocketing thousands of dollars from fees accrued from AP testing. Since 2002, Dr. McCaskill pocketed over $75,000 from lower-income families, saying that it'd be too difficult to refund them all. The students received an email saying Dr. McCaskill was on medical leave, and that a new principal, Randy Asher, was anointed. We'll get back to Principal Asher, but after retiring, Dr. McCaskill took up a higher paying position as principal for Hillside High School in New Jersey, where he became even less supervised. On May 1st of 2013, Dr. McCaskill was placed on administrative leave after allegedly spanking a female student. What's disturbing is that two other students also came forward about the spankings, meaning this had been going on for a while. What's interesting is that back in Brooklyn Tech, he once accused a teacher of corporal punishment, but never explained how. Sadly, the mother of the victim defended the principal, believing in her heart that he did nothing wrong. If she's not making a big deal out of this, why is everyone else? Because we're not fucking stupid, bro. What do you mean? A near 60-year-old man is putting hands on your underage daughter and you haven't had the slightest clue about why people are so mad?
Principal McCaskill. With his job on the line, Hillside High's principal Lee McCaskill arrived at the school board meeting ready to defend himself.
Did you spank her?
No. I've got to go inside and address
He's accused of spanking a 17-year-old female student.
Did you speak to the mother?
Did you talk to her before this meeting?
No, I haven't spoken to the mother.
Because she seems to have changed her view of things.
I have not contacted nor spoken with the mother.
And just as the meeting started, a real shocker.
I feel in my heart he did no wrong.
As the woman who identified herself as the victim's mother stood up and defended the principal.
If the parent, which is me, is not making a big deal out of it, why is everybody else?
The principal has been on administrative leave since the incident came to light. He was told to stay home and away from the school after multiple witnesses reported seeing him spank the student. Amid mounting evidence, it looked like Principal McCaskill would lose his job.
I've never touched a child. Have a good day.
McCaskill slipped into the building through a side door and immediately went into a closed meeting with board members. He avoided the public meeting altogether.
Dr. Lee McCaskill is one of the most despicable, disrespectful, downright dumbest principals of all time. Our school doesn't even respect him. He's barely mentioned on our school website, and I believe that's for the best. After all that, the censorship, the douchebaggery, the policies, the explicit emails, the fake address, the spankings, he finally resigned on July 30th of 2013, 20 years after initially becoming principal. He had a long reign of terror. The only improvements he made to our school were structural renovations, adding a football field, and buying new computers. However, his list of wrongdoings will see him in hell, and I, for one, can't wait to see him there. Dr. Lee McCaskill was a dictator surrounded by weak people such as Miss Tracy Atkins who would do all his bidding. It's sad that they were given unchecked power. It's worse that they kept getting away with it. Having a senseless leader like this only demoralizes the school. It benefits no one but the authority, and it's a cautionary tale to not abuse your power. If you thought you heard the worst of it, we're only halfway done. So boom! You're me, you're in the first month of school, and you look outside. What do you see? Oh shit, it's 3 faculty members chasing after somebody with what appears to be a baseball bat. The man is running to his car, and now they have him surrounded. What is going on? On September 29th of 2016, all this happened outside of Brooklyn Tech, stemming from a dispute the 2 teachers had earlier. Luckily, the teacher getting chased was helped out by a supervisor, and no one got hurt. But you gotta wonder, where did they get that baseball bat? Students, teachers, faculty members, we're all a little bit crazy sometimes. In May of 2021, my old chemistry teacher, Mr. Harkavy, put on one of the worst rated Zoom classes of all time. He titled the lesson, Classic Comedy, Bill Cosby, defending it saying, the man may be foul, but his comedy is not. Some parents were understandably upset. I would be too if I had to deal with Mr. Harkavy again. I'm not sure why as a chemistry teacher, he felt the need to review Bill Cosby's comedy work. Someone please go check the contents of his fanny pack. As for the weird shenanigans our teachers have gotten up to, that's kind of it. But just wait till we talk about the real villains of this story. The 2000s were cemented in tragedy, so I'd like for this next section to be a remembrance of Technites who've sadly passed away. In January of 2005, while waiting for the elevator, Carrie Wong, a 14-year-old student at Brooklyn Tech, turned to a school safety agent and said, "I don't feel well." She mysteriously collapsed onto the floor and was taken to Brooklyn Hospital, where she was pronounced dead. She had a long history of fainting, but authorities were unable to figure out what actually caused this, and many took to online blogs to mourn her loss. In February of 2009, 16-year-old Brooklyn Tech student Robert Ogle and his friend Alex Paul were attending a party in Middle Village, Queens. Although they only met that night, Alex noticed Robert drinking a little too much, and decided it was best to just walk him home. At the same time, a 27-year-old man named Kenneth Geyer had left a different party, and was on his way to a deli outside of Woodhaven Boulevard. Outside this deli, 3 men had left their Kia idling for a few minutes, allowing Kenneth the opportunity to simply drive off with it. While crossing the street only a half-mile away from his home, Kenneth struck both Robert and Alex, with neighbors claiming he put it in reverse and ran them over a few more times. Robert Ogle died at the scene, while Alex Paul was later rushed to Elmer's hospital and pronounced dead. The neighbors came to help, but there was nothing that they could do. The two laid there like broken rag dolls. None of them deserved what they got. Alex was a kind-hearted person who recently fell on some hard times, and Robert was an aspiring journalist who's remembered by his friends and family as a great smart kid. After running over these two boys, Kenneth headed back to the same deli to return the Kia, but was met by the police who immediately put him in handcuffs. It said that while being arrested, he showed no remorse, and even had a grin on his face. His blood alcohol level was at .126, well over the legal limit, and when giving his explanation, he said he was homeless, admitted to drinking and driving, then claimed the police had nothing on him, and unsurprisingly, went on a racist rant afterwards. In 2003, Kenneth had lost his job at a clock factory. He lost his fiancée, his home, and went on a full downward spiral. Do people like this deserve to die? Maybe, but sadly, he did not, as all he received was a sentence of 15 years, the maximum time you can get for vehicular manslaughter. Kenneth's case specifically changed the law so that you can now leave your car running unattended, as you now be hit with a $250 fine for doing so. The parents, Brandon and May Ogle, were both devastated. Yeah, they caught the guy, but that doesn't bring back their son. 3 months after Robert's death, the parents sued Kenneth, the Kia's owner, and the parents of the teens whose birthday party he attended. They argued that if there was no alcohol served, Robert would have still been alive. There is an appropriate amount of responsibility that should be given to all parties involved. But like 98% Kenneth's, he didn't have to reverse back. That man's clearly evil. Regardless, the parents were obviously looking for justice, but both the Kia owner and the party host claimed negligence. In September of 2014, truck driver Jong Lee was falling under financial hardships, suffering from injuries related to a car crash in 2011. His wife, Sung Lee, had noticed their dire situation, taking up a position at a nail salon to help out the household. Concerned with his health and the resulting debt, he wrote a letter to his relatives. "If I die by myself, it will cause too many problems for my child and my wife. We all need to leave." After writing this note, he would grab a knife, slash the throats of both his wife and their 15-year-old son, Brian Lee, stacking their bodies on top of each other before setting the apartment on fire and then taking his own life. Noticing smoke coming from the apartment, one of the neighbors went to go check. She previously heard glass breaking, thumps, and now saw blood all over the apartment floor. At around 4:50 a.m., she called 911, having 60 firefighters show up to get it under control. To the people that knew the family, they were normal. The parents loved Brian, but Jong's financial woes took a toll on his mental health. He once filed for bankruptcy and was already under $100,000 in debt by this time. A family friend remembers Jong banging his head against the wall. He would go a little nuts sometimes. The students at Brooklyn Tech mourned the loss of our fellow classmate, with over 100 people packing into their funeral. Brian was described as a kind soul, a genuinely nice person who'd inspire others in his community, and he always had a positive outlook in life. In November of 2014, 14-year-old freshman Mohammed Naeem Uddin was on his way to an after-school program, just 1 block away from his home. At the same time, 78-year-old Lynn Reynolds was making a left-hand turn with a red Chevy Impala, failing to yield to traffic laws, and unknowingly running over Naeem in the process. Faisal, a relative of Naeem's, found him lying in the middle of the street, still alive, but hurt really badly. Both his cousin and best friend heard the news immediately, along with the rest of the Bangladeshi community there, all rushing outside to comfort the boy in his final moments.
This video shows 14-year-old Mohammed Uddin with a backpack over his shoulder, casually walking home just moments before the fatal accident.
Still, like when I close my eyes, I see what he was doing and how he was. So think about how the parents gonna forget about it, what the parents gonna feel about it.
Speaking through tears, Mizanur Rahman remembers his nephew Mohammed Uddin, a 14-year-old who always wore a smile, loved school, New York, and most of all, helping others.
He is very bright, very intelligent, very good, and very gentle.
The ninth grader who attended Brooklyn Tech moved to America with his family a decade ago from Bangladesh. He had one dream: to become a medical specialist. But that dream abruptly ended when police say 78-year-old Lynn Reynolds hit and killed the teenager and took off.
Naeem was rushed to the Maimonides Medical Center, where doctors performed emergency surgery on him. But unfortunately, his injuries were too severe, and he died around 10 p.m., only 5 hours after the accident. He was loved by many. Over 150 people came to Maimonides to support the family, remembering him as a young, intelligent kid. In December of 2014, a memorial service was held for Muhammad Uddin. Hundreds of people showed up, mourning the loss of a friend, a family member, and a role model in the community. His death marked the third among students at his middle school who were killed by cars in the past 13 months. So parents and councilmen alike joined to call for more safety measures. 2 years later, the city installed new traffic lights, curb extensions, and added a crossing guard near the intersection where Naeem died, meaning children would have a safer pathway to school. Although Naeem can't be brought back, he'll forever be the reason why many other kids in his neighborhood hopefully don't suffer the same fate. As for Lynn Reynolds, she left the scene, headed 2 blocks away to her apartment, parked her car, and headed upstairs. The police tracked down the damaged Impala and arrested Lynn soon after, charging her for a multitude of crimes. But Lynn's lawyer argued that it was all an accident, that it was too dark outside at 5 p.m., and that she didn't see the boy after getting out of her car. So, no crime was committed here. All she did was accidentally kill a child. Lynn was released on a $25,000 cash bail and served probation afterwards.
Reynolds faced a judge today, and her attorney spoke to News 4 after she appeared in court.
Our heart goes out to the family of the young man. I know that they're in pain tonight, but this is an accident. She did not commit a crime.
While Muhammad's parents are now planning their child's funeral.
On a more personal note, Muhammad Uddin was in my 5th period Spanish class freshman year. He sat right behind me for the first 2 months and then a few seats to my left during the beginning of November. He was really smart, really social. He always cracked jokes. He was one of the first people I ever talked to at Brooklyn Tech. His death set a lot of things into reality for me. I heard of Brian Lee's case, but when no one sat in Naeem's chair for the rest of the year, that's when I realized, oh shit, death comes for us all. On February 4th of 2019, the NYPD asked the public for any help on the whereabouts of 65-year-old mother, Paula Chin, who was reported missing earlier that day. She was a loving mother of 2, often seen vacationing with her boys, Brandon and Jared Ang, in places like Arizona. Miss Chin was also extremely wealthy, owning a few properties, such as her home in Tribeca and her weekend house in Morristown, New Jersey. Her eldest son, Brandon, reported her missing, and within a day, the police had found her, but only in a garbage bag.
Well, Bill and Sade, late tonight, detectives are still inside that apartment. It is an unusual residence in that you can hardly even tell from the outside that anyone even lives up there. But Paula Chin did live there for more than 30 years with her 2 sons. And tonight, cops say one of her sons reported her missing. The other one is now under arrest.
On January 31st of that same year, while at their Tribeca apartment, Paula had asked her son Jared to finally move out. He dropped out of college, he had just lost his job at the dining hall, and he didn't even have a driver's license. But what he did have was 2 girlfriends. Following their argument, Jared had taken a blunt object, smashed it over his mother's head, then grabbed a knife, and I think you get what I mean. After killing his mom, he immediately phoned up his girlfriend, Caitlin O'Rourke, telling her it's done, he's free, and that he got rid of the problem. He told her it took a while for her to die, hung up, and then sanitized the apartment. Jared then called their mutual friend, Jennifer Lopez, asking for assistance in moving the body out of the apartment and driving it to their weekend home in New Jersey. Security cameras revealed that around 12:50 a.m., Jennifer had backed up Miss Chin's Land Cruiser into the garage, and around 2:30 a.m., they had stuffed a bloody duffel bag into the trunk. Inside the trunk, they had gathered carpets, blankets, extra pairs of clothing, rubber gloves, and duct tape, next picking up Caitlin, and then the trio headed towards his New Jersey home. While in Morristown, Caitlin admitted to washing their clothes, while Jared and Jennifer got to quick work disposing of Paula's body into a garbage bin. Jennifer would go on to say, the hardest part was backing up the car into their Tribeca apartment garage. Noticing his mom missing for the past 4 days, the eldest son, Brandon, decided to phone in the police and let them search their mom's car. The trunk had everything, and that's when Brandon realized the culprit was his brother. The police traveled to their New Jersey home and uncovered Paula amongst a pile of garbage. Jared Ang, Kaylin O'Rourke, and Jennifer Lopez were all arrested on February 6th, and while being handcuffed, Jared denied any involvement in his mother's death, saying he loved her very much.
22-year-old Jared Eng charged with hiding his mother's body. Cops believe the 65-year-old's throat was slit, so who, if anyone, killed Paula Chin? Her son says it wasn't him.
Jared, did you kill your mother? Jared, did you love her? Nah, I love her very much. She gave me everything.
Also arrested tonight and charged with helping hide the body, Jared Eng's 21-year-old girlfriend, Caitlin O'Rourke, and friend, 18-year-old Jennifer Lopez from the East Village.
Did you help kill Jared's mom?
Chin was last seen January 31st, then reported missing by Jared's older brother on Monday at the 1st Precinct. Their mother's body was then discovered yesterday at her other home in Morristown, New Jersey. Investigators believe Chin was killed in her Tribeca apartment on Vestry Street over a family dispute over money, and that her killers put the body in a trash bag, drove it to New Jersey, and left it near other trash bags at that home.
Toll records showed Jared had gone to New Jersey twice that day. His girlfriend confessed to their phone conversations, and the police had texts incriminating Jennifer as well. While being interrogated, Jared denied killing his mother, saying he went to their New Jersey home to retrieve his coin collection in order to pay rent for the apartment he didn't have. Paula was worth quite a lot of money, but Jared insisted this had nothing to do with her wealth, but rather her health, saying she had possible Alzheimer's. I guess killing her is one way to cure that, but it's obvious that Jared was after the money, which he otherwise wouldn't have gotten until he turned 35. He was mentally unwell. He probably would have killed his older brother too if that meant the inheritance got to him first. But he wasn't alone here. Jared and Kaylin met at SUNY Newpolt's. They were a polyamorous couple, having met Jennifer when she was 18. They would all Netflix and chill together. Kaylin and Jennifer's lawyers both argued they had nothing to do with the violent nature of this crime, or anything to do with it at all. They were all charged with concealing a corpse, tampering with evidence, and murder charges. As for Jared, he was held without bail. Kaylin was held at $25,000, while Jennifer's bail was set to $100,000.
Investigators say she was stabbed 3 times.
It really makes me feel bad.
Those who knew Chin shaken by news of her death, describing her as a friendly mother. Police believe she was killed in her building on Vestry Street in Tribeca, and then her body was driven 35 miles to her New Jersey home where it was dumped. Chin's son, his female friend, and another woman, said to be his girlfriend, now all charged with hiding the body. Accusations Chin's friends say have left them in disbelief.
I really can't see him doing this. It's just a tragedy for this family.
So far, Jared Eng, his girlfriend, and that third friend have only been charged with concealing a corpse. They have not been charged with murder, but the charges they are facing are expected to be upgraded.
Paula Chin was a successful business owner with multiple properties. She volunteered at the Tribeca Film Festival. And Jared was this mentally ill, deranged rich kid who thought he was entitled to his mother's money. Caitlin put up with that guy, so, she must be too. And look at Jennifer, mixing Nike with Adidas. Just bad decisions all around. On September 16th of 2022, we'd uncover more information when Jared took a guilty plea. He was angry that his mommy had grounded him. He just wanted to visit his 2 girlfriends upstate. He considered putting pills in her coffee machine, cutting the brakes on her bike, or hiring a hitman to push her off a building. He changed the passwords for his mom's bank accounts, searched for inheritance lawyers, and tried locating his mother's life insurance policy. He searched Amazon for picks and shovels and Googled DIY bone meal. He'd spit on his mother's grave. He thought of her as nothing but a source of income. After his well-thought-out plan, he would just plead insanity. Jared was truly a criminal mastermind. Jared told the judge he was at rock bottom, that his mother deserved better, and that he'll always love her. This idiot thought he was in a courtroom drama. He believed Kaylin and Jennifer deserved leniency, saying, "Their biggest mistake was to fall in love with me." The judge, unbothered, sentenced him to 22 years to life in prison. The two women were allegedly manipulated by the money. Jared was essentially grooming Jennifer. He'd tell them rich people get away with anything. Surprisingly, the judge cleared her $100,000 bond, putting her on supervised release. Kaylin's lawyer got her bail refunded, and she was eventually released as well, having to only deal with the consequences of being a shitty person. What does all this have to do with Brooklyn Tech? Absolutely nothing at all. He graduated from there in 2014, the crime happened in 2019, and he was formally sentenced in 2022. This next story is a bit more personal though, involving someone I knew, someone I shared classes with, and someone I'd consider a distant friend. In January of 2022, Salman Sarkar got involved in an argument with his mother, when younger brother Sean Sarkar stepped in to defend her. Salman would grab a knife and plunge it into Sean's neck and shoulder, mortally wounding him, and the police were called soon after. Sean was bleeding heavily, going into cardiac arrest, and was then transported to Elmhurst Hospital, where he was pronounced dead.
When officers arrived, they found Sean Sarkar had been stabbed in the neck and shoulder. Sarkar was taken to nearby Elmhurst Hospital, where he was pronounced dead. A suspect was taken into custody at the scene. No word yet on possible charges.
Sean was a cool guy, man. I wouldn't say we were that close, but we passed around answers for different classes. When I went to my first high school party, I remember passing out on the couch, and two people came and handed me a glass of water. One of them was Sean. I was really thankful he did that. I'll never forget it. It brought me back to life. But that was Sean Sarkar, a cool dude who was tragically killed by his brother. In July of 2023, retired English teacher Roberta Lerman was walking across the street in Union Square when a Staten Island-bound bus tragically struck her, dragging her between the rear wheels and killing her on the spot. It was traumatizing for everyone to witness. The bus driver remained on the scene, and no criminal charges were filed against him. Miss Lerman had a lot of energy. She was just enjoying life. After retiring, she started traveling independently, visiting places like Costa Rica. She also exposed Miss Tracy Atkins and Dr. McCaskill back in 2005, when the New York Times published an article about the abuse she was receiving from them. While at Brooklyn Tech, she was a role model to other teachers, helped students prepare for the SAT, and put on incredible plays with her students. Miss Lerman was recognized as one of the best English teachers in our city. When she dies, she hopes that's her legacy. Not the stupid shit from Miss Atkins, but the love that she showed to her students. In November of 2023, recent Brooklyn Tech graduate Arif Muhammad had rented a zip car in Oakland, California, deciding to cruise around with a friend. At around 11 p.m., while on Highway 13, a black sedan crashed into their zip car, but fled the scene, leaving Arif's rental disabled. While inspecting the damage from the road, Arif was tragically struck by another black sedan attempting to swerve past his vehicle, which killed him on the spot. Unfortunately, the second car also drove away, but police suggested both these vehicles would have noticeable damages.
You knew this morning, one person has died after a double hit and run in Oakland. The California Highway Patrol says around 10:30 last night, a rental zip car crashed into another vehicle south of the Lincoln Avenue exit. The zip car became disabled, and the other car drove away. That's when two people in the zip car got out. One of them was hit and killed by a car that swerved to avoid the zip car. That car also took off. The driver of the zip car wasn't injured. Investigators have not released any information about the cars that left the crash.
Unfortunately, Arif's case became one of the 90% of hit and runs that never get successfully prosecuted, with no resulting lead coming about since. Arif was dedicated to helping his community and family, taking up a tutoring job to help other kids also get into Brooklyn Tech. In September of 2023, Sasha Terrell Keene had entered through the doors of Brooklyn Tech, hoping to one day make a difference in this world. She was an intelligent kid. Good grades, did extra credit, came home on time, she was caring of others, and was an overall swell person to be around. Unfortunately, she hung out with the wrong crowd, experimented with different substances, and came across morphines and later fentanyl. Coming from a well rounded family, they suspected nothing at first, but when they found her dead on their couch, it was shocking to say the least. Sasha's parents are just one of many who lost their young ones to this drug epidemic, and they'd like you to encourage school officials and politicians to address the ongoing crisis, as to protect future children from the same fate as Sasha and many others. These kids did not overdose, they were murdered, either by their friends who got them hooked, the dealer who hooked them up, or the politicians who failed to address the crisis. Our school's had a lot of misfortunes, we've gone through quite a bit. But here's where all of that ends and the beginning of our degeneracy starts. Brooklyn Tech has had its fair share of pedos. My first core memory of the school was reading that a pedophile worked there. But don't worry, we're gonna go through all that. As a disclaimer, we're gonna be diving deep into some sexual abuse. If you've been abused, you are not alone. There are more unreported cases than there are false accusations. So go to two trusted adults, go to the police, just do your best to get yourself some justice. In March of 2005, Teacher of the Year Stephen Ostrin was arrested from his home on charges of harassment and endangering the welfare of a child. The kicker? He was originally called out 13 years ago. In 1992, a female student from a different school reported that Mr. Ostrin told X-rated stories and rubbed their shoulders and arms. Reports came from other students alleging that he'd also drive them home. School officials reprimanded him, putting this on his file. But that did little to stop him from being hired at Brooklyn Tech by none other than Dr. McCaskill. In January of 2002, another female student reported Mr. Ostrin's roaming hands and explicit comments, thinking if she spoke up, it wouldn't happen again. Instead, school officials at Brooklyn Tech convinced her not to press charges, telling her that Mr. Ostrin would instead retire when she graduated in June of that year. Although her parents didn't believe her, Dr. McCaskill did, calling up a special investigator who recommended disciplinary action against Mr. Ostrin, but not dismissal. She reported that Mr. Ostrin groped her body, said lewd comments, and wanted to date her. She'd freeze up, praying for this just to stop. Sadly, not many others believed her, siding with the Vietnam veteran Mr. Ostrin instead. Mr. Ostrin's lawyer argued that she had ulterior motives, that she didn't want to do the workload expected of her. But the student denied this, saying she felt violated by Mr. Ostrin. Scoop back to March of 2005, and now we have another 15-year-old girl accusing Mr. Ostrin of inappropriately touching her, kissing her, calling her a little sex slave, and requesting a striptease. She reported this to both her parents and Dr. McCaskill, which finally got him arrested for the one charge of endangering the welfare of a child. During the courtroom trial, many current and former students showed up to hug, kiss, and shake hands with Mr. Ostrin. One of them was the creator of the Brooklyn Tech Survivors page, who believed Mr. Ostrin was set up by both the student and Dr. McCaskill. But we know that's not entirely true. Mr. Ostrin shortly posted the $2,500 bail, being reassigned to an administrative position where he was making slightly more than his teaching salary. In April of 2006, he was acquitted of any charges. There were mixed reactions. Some of the students wanted him back, while others seemingly didn't. In a blog post from 2005, it's clear that Mr. Ostrin had the respect of most students, but they also admitted he'd give boys hugs while making the girls give him a kiss. They noted that teachers shouldn't be interacting with students in that manner. Mr. Ostrin was put into the Brooklyn Rubber Room, a place where teachers who were dealing with misconduct issues were sent. He was getting paid his normal yearly salary to do nothing. But teaching was Mr. Ostrin's life. He would even send out a Regents prep sheet for his students to use during his absence.
Rubber rooms cost taxpayers more than $53 million every year. Some teachers have been paid to do nothing for as long as 7 years. And when we asked the Department of Education about it, officials simply said the process is a long one.
On April 26 of 2007, Mr. Ostrin was again arrested and charged for the criminal possession of kale salad and paying for a prostitute. These charges were dropped, and in December of 2010, 5 years after his original arrest, all charges on Mr. Ostrin were dropped, with all the accusations being claimed unsubstantiated. There's a 15-page report that dives deeper into this, but Mr. Ostrin would be suspended for half a year without pay and was then permitted to return as a teacher. The hearing officer claimed Mr. Ostrin was not soliciting sex, but rather engaging in a sexually charged banter with an introverted student. The two former students sued the city, netting $150,000 each. Mr. Ostrin admitted he was touchy-feely. It was just his style, but it wasn't criminal. After years of misconduct, Mr. Ostrin retired, winding up on a disability pension, saying, "The courts ruled in my favor." From the students who've defended him, they paint the narrative as a revenge plot done by both the student and Dr. McCaskill. But from my perspective, I believe that regardless of if he was a good teacher or not, he should have never allowed students to kiss him. He should have never been touchy-feely, and he hired a prostitute while having a wife and 2 kids, so he gets little sympathy from me. In January of 2006, Michael Conte was working a few jobs throughout New York City. He was a custodian, a repairman, a machinist. Mr. Conte had a lot of trade skills. One of them was installing hidden cameras in the bathrooms of the places he worked at, including 2 Brooklyn high schools. A mother in Long Island noticed a security camera in her daughter's bathroom, calling back to when Mr. Conte insistently asked to repair it. He hid a tiny wireless camera inside of a heat lamp, then stashed the hard drive behind the family TV. He taped them, their friends, he saw them brush their teeth and get ready for bed. He knew what he was doing was wrong. He just likes watching minors get undressed. On January 22nd of 2006, the mother called the police, who found the 46-year-old pervert in his Staten Island home, arresting him on charges of unlawful surveillance and endangering the welfare of a child. A search of his home yielded more than 800 cassette tapes and DVDs, pinhole cameras, lenses, and other surveillance equipment. They found videos dating back to 1988. Some were from his own home, including those of his mother and sister. He had videos of the girls' bathrooms of both Brooklyn Tech and Westinghouse High School. He was suspended from Brooklyn Tech over 10 years ago, and recently fired from Westinghouse High School for filming the teacher's bathroom. One last thing, authorities found a shotgun and ammunition amongst the policy CP, so an additional weapons charge was added to the mix. He had 2 bails set, one that he posted for $50,000 and the other that quickly followed at $75,000, which he failed to post, leaving him in police custody to await trial. There, he pleaded not guilty, and his lawyers argued that most of these tapes are innocuous. Yeah, okay. A grand jury handed Michael a 360-count indictment, coming with a 4-year sentence and a $5,000 fine. Unfortunately, he avoided any jail time by taking a plea bargain, receiving 5 years probation, 500 hours of community service, registering as a sex offender, and having to see a psychiatrist for the next 5 years. Do I believe this was a just punishment? Not even a little. He should have gone to jail equal to the amount of years he was filming inside those bathrooms. Michael Conte is still out and about, so if you called a repairman recently, go check for any hidden cameras in your bathroom.
Of being not only as unprofessional as they come, but nothing short of dangerous. If you look at the conduct that marked his entire tenure as a teacher here, there was warning sign after warning sign. Every interaction he ever had with a student appears as if it was somewhat unprofessional at the very least. This is insane.
In October of 2005, while living in Maryland, Sean Shanak worked as a pilot, looking to soon retire and settle into a teaching position. He got married to someone 13 years younger than him, having a daughter, but that didn't pan out. They got divorced, he was laid off, and his home went into foreclosure. One day, he saw his neighbor, 11-year-old Devontae Watson, throwing rocks outside. Mr. Shanak jumped on top of him, physically assaulting the boy, beating and choking him until the police were called. Devontae's eyes turned black, his face was swollen, and he wound up in the emergency room, missing several weeks of school. When being interrogated, he claimed the young 11-year-old teen had thrown objects towards his house, which doesn't justify beating and choking an 11-year-old teen. In July of 2006, Mr. Shanak received probation, needing to do 16 hours of community service and having to pay for Devontae's medical bills and lawyer fees. Mr. Shanek received probation before judgment, meaning in the eyes of the law, he was not guilty of beating up an 11-year-old teen. He could apply to jobs and say he was not convicted of a crime, meaning that he could potentially work at schools, but maybe in some other states, like say New York, and in a school known as Brooklyn Tech. When applying for positions, he went through many officials, having to note down his arrest, but claiming it was against a young male teen. Now, you can't deny someone a job on the basis of an arrest. There was nothing on Mr. Shanak's file that would provide a reason to deny employment. If only he didn't lie about assaulting an 11-year-old boy.
And at the time they hire him, he apparently has an arrest on his record for attacking an 11-year-old little boy. And they hire him anyway.
Sometime in August of 2008, he was hired as a physics teacher for the aerospace department, with a student later accusing him of verbal abuse that extended his probationary period. For our 2009 masquerade ball, Mr. Shanak wore a French maid costume exposing his front and rear end. A concerned staff member complained Mr. Shanak was inappropriate with the students there, making lewd and sexually explicit gestures, which our principal completely ignored. 3 years later, he cosplayed as Britney Spears from her Hit Me Baby One More Time music video, again showing off his body in discomforting ways.
Can I see the pictures, please? As a French maid, that's the teacher. And in the other picture, he's dressed as Britney Spears. If I could see that picture. There he is in a midriff top and like a little schoolgirl's plaid skirt. This is the teacher they hired.
Devontae would wonder how that man could ever become a teacher. Mr. Shanak had tossed him on the ground, choked him, and repeatedly punched the boy. And yet, he was now teaching a class. Sadly, neither his family got by. He'd tutor them, buy them lunch, let them cut class, he'd smoke with them, attend their parties. He was an equal opportunity predator. He was like a bro, you know? He was basically a teenager. He would do everything a teenager would do.
He was inappropriate, you know? He was like a teenager, but he was basically a teenager. He did everything that a teenager would do.
On August 26 of 2014, police showed up to the door of Mr. Shanak's home at 6:15 a.m., informing him that he was under arrest for sending an explicit photo of himself to a student over Snapchat. He replied, "F you, I'm not going anywhere." Mr. Shanak had asked a 16-year-old girl to pose for a nude painting, which she declined but told no one about. Mr. Shanak then sent her a picture of his genitalia over Snapchat. Horrified, she screenshotted it and reported Mr. Shanak to her parents, detailing the rest of what happened. Mr. Shanak pleaded not guilty and was held on a cash bail of either $25,000 or $100,000. Instead of being fired on the spot, he was reassigned to the infamous rubber room, continuing to collect a salary of $52,000. Upon finding out, former students were not surprised about the news. They knew he was a perv. The way he looked at girls was a little bit gross. Some talked about his class, some were disappointed, but most knew he was bound to get caught. Some even started privating their accounts because their tweets were going up on articles. After his first arrest, investigators seized his computers and phones, finding thousands of text messages, along with hundreds of photos and videos of him doing unspeakable things with his students. The victims originally never came forward. It was only because of the police investigation that they were ever discovered. One instance came when a mother discovered her teen daughter was infatuated with Mr. Shanak, but they never came forward until after the initial investigations. Mr. Shanak took her daughter and her friends to Coney Island, wearing loose-fitting swim trunks that showed off his private area. To say he was a pervert is widely an understatement. He was a weirdo fucking freak demon. He'd often brag about his threesomes, partake in gay orgies, cross-dress. He took a girl out of state to watch him get serviced by other men. He was not someone you'd want around children.
You look up to your teachers and stuff, and sometimes you even see them as like a parent figure, so it's really like scary to think that it would happen.
Students disturbed to hear the 44-year-old is accused of abusing 6 more girls between 13 and 19 years old, starting in 2011.
He had a hard drive full of, jail time, including animal-human stuff. Really disgusting things. But that wasn't all. He often intimidated these young girls, threatening to blackmail them by going to their parents. One of these victims was groomed over social networking sites. He'd expose himself to her, he took her to the Museum of Sex and kissed her, they met at hotels, and had intercourse on a daily basis. One day, she was invited to a Halloween party with him. He wore his schoolgirl outfit, and she got freaked out. So he started driving recklessly and threatening her. She escaped, hid behind another vehicle, then in some bushes for 30 to 40 minutes. She texted him that she called the cops, and that's when he finally drove off, allowing her to catch a train. He often took these girls to nude beaches. One of them included taking a 15-year-old girl, a sophomore. He lied to her and told her they were going to get school supplies, then supplied her with Jack Daniels until she passed out, and took her back to his home afterwards. When all this came out, the nude beach became the headline most chose to focus on.
Prosecutors say Shaynak took a 15-year-old to a nude beach and had sex with 3 girls, an 18-year-old, 19-year-old, and one who was underage. He allegedly sent photos of his private parts to several minors, grabbed them, and gave them alcohol and cigarettes.
He allegedly preyed on victims that experienced tragedies in their lives recently, something going on at home that they could escape from. He preyed on girls who had issues, who had problems. He jumped on that like white on rice. Students suspect there were even more cases that went unreported, including potential male victims.
I think if these allegations are true, that he's a serial pedophile because he knew how to pick his victims. He gave them cigarettes. He went to parties with them. He knew how to build their trust. And I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of these victims did come from dysfunctional households. They were vulnerable. You always talk about that on your show.
Well, Sam, do you know anything about that? Is there any information?
Well, I do know that he was very calculated. And first of all, the police have found like 3 computers, hard drives full of videos and responses and text messages, thousands of text messages, and hardcore evidence suggesting that all of these claims are true.
On September 30th of 2014, officers again showed up to Mr. Shaynak's house, this time arresting him for sexual misconduct with 6 more teenage girls, between the ages of 13 and 19. He would entice them with alcohol, bogeys, and bud, asking them for sexual favors in return for better grades in class or letters of recommendations. He was indicted on charges of resisting arrest, sexual abuse, kidnapping, committing a sexual act on a minor, forcible touching, obscenity, endangering the welfare of a child, and mass spreading photos of his genitalia. He was held on a $1 million bond, facing up to 25 years in prison, on top of the original charge brought up in August.
If convicted, Shaynak could spend several decades behind bars. The most serious charge alone, second-degree kidnapping, carries up to 25 years in prison.
During the trial, both his siblings came to visit, one of them being Craig Shaynak, a Hollywood actor best known for minor roles in both Ted 2 and Ray Donovan.
I just came by to wish you luck. Really? No. Because you're a loser. Am not. R2? Not two.
Well, both of you.
See you at the games. Hawk loser.
The parents were rightfully upset. How did this predator go unchecked at our school? Our former principal, Randy Asher, told parents he was as shocked as they were. He asked them to find out if there were even more victims, and that he personally never saw any red flags. It had to be kept very secretive, as Mr. Shaynak became a flight risk due to his experience as a pilot. Still, many students saw it coming. Many former students revealed he'd explain lectures in a very sexual way. Parents were also concerned about how Mr. Asher would address this to us, and he basically never did. I was there when this all went down. The only teacher that slightly ever referenced what happened was my bio teacher, who fully reassured us that we can go to her if we were ever being abused by someone at the school. That was it. That was all we got.
that principal should be put in jail with him, and the key should be thrown away, because they're both responsible for this mess. And I don't know what it is about teachers today, but this is killing me. You know, this guy dressed inappropriately. Other teachers even acknowledge, yeah, we saw him walking outside of school with a hot young Russian student, but yeah, you know, nobody can be that stupid. Really? I mean, all of these signs were up there, red flags. This guy's dressing like a woman at school parties, and nobody says anything.
While in prison, inmates knew of his story. Hell, the whole of New York knew of him. He was allegedly being investigated by the FBI. He was bombarded by reporters, memes, even Mayor Bill de Blasio reprimanded him, claiming he'd never see the inside of a classroom again. In January of 2015, 3 victims filed a lawsuit against Mr. Shanak, Brooklyn Tech, and the DOE, alleging that the school had prior knowledge of his nefarious activities, but chose not to do anything because his aerospace program generated a great deal of donations for the school. Principal Asher allegedly kept Shanak as a protected staff member, turning a blind eye to his indiscretions. According to other staff members, he became Mr. Asher's pet, turning into the most valuable teacher because only he could run the aerospace program. They put money over the safety of us, the students.
But a number of the teachers said something to the principal, and apparently he was the principal's favorite because he was launching the aerospace program. Who cares? BFD, where are their priorities? It's crazy.
Well, don't you think there's
There were several student and teacher complaints. It was common knowledge that he'd buy cigarettes for the girls, and the owner of a bakery in the neighborhood saw Mr. Shanak sexually harassing a student, which he reported to school officials, but none of that stuck. In March of 2015, another victim sued the city over her abuse. She alleged Mr. Shanak made her extremely uncomfortable, would advise other students on how to have sexual relationships with teachers, and had kidnapped her in order to give him oral. You'd think that after all this, being placed on a $1 million bond, 2 lawsuits, and facing 25 years to life, people would find him revolting. What's insane about all of this is that even when the allegations came to light, some students still supported this fucking monster, even trying to raise money to get him sprung from jail. In December of 2015, his 36-count indictment was brought down to only 9, now facing 5 years in prison due to taking a guilty plea. As part of the agreement, he could never teach again, he can't contact the victims, and has to register as an offender. Most of the victims became uncooperative, now wanting to relay the horrors of sleeping with this old man. And Mr. Shanak weirdly refused to sign an order of protection for one specific victim.
He will never teach here at the school again. The district attorney's office says that 45-year-old Sean Shanak pleaded guilty yesterday to 9 of the 36 counts against him in exchange for serving just 5 years in prison. He was originally facing 25 years. Investigators say he admitted in court that between March of 2012 and August of 2013, he shared nude photos, had inappropriate conversations with several of the students, and even abducted one of them, taking her to a nude beach in New Jersey without her parents' consent.
Sadly, one of the lawsuits fizzled out when a victim missed a deadline to file a notice of claim, but 5 of them managed to receive $90,000 each, including lawyer fees. After all that, do I believe 5 years in prison and $450,000 of our tax money is a just punishment for this nasty, disgusting pervert? No, that's why you can find him on the National RSO Registry, showing that he currently resides in Los Angeles, California, with potentially his brother Craig. I'm with one of the parents here. I believe people like this should just rot in jail. You can't make him right. This isn't going to help future victims or the possible ones he could have had while living in Los Angeles. This foul old man is allowed to walk our streets. He's a dangerous man, and I'd like for you to know his face. This is Sean Shanak, the most perverted teacher we've ever had at Brooklyn Tech. But he wasn't our last. Somehow, we had 3 more. While working at the Academy for Software Engineering, school aide Robert Sutton Jr. had met a young girl. He got her number and then bombarded her with inappropriate text messages. 2 months later, Robert transferred employment to Brooklyn Tech, stepped into one of the bathrooms, and filmed himself masturbating within school boundaries. He sent the video to the young girl, who had enough of him, and reported all this to the police in May of 2016. Robert resigned from Brooklyn Tech. He was not arrested, faced no criminal charges, but he's not allowed to work in New York City schools anymore. In the fall of 2016, a father confronted his son about some emails he'd found on his phone. It seemed like he was in a relationship, only with someone who knew it was wrong. In May of 2016, 33-year-old married teacher Marissa Kazanave formed a relationship with a 16-year-old boy who was part of her chorus program. They fell in love, they romanticized over their sneaky link, and even met on 2 recorded occasions. She would drunk text him late at night, even planning a romantic getaway weekend in July, hoping to cross off some things on their bucket list. After confronting the school with this information, Marissa quit in December of that year, and the school handled it pretty quickly, so as to not face another media scandal. When asked about their relationship, she denied having intercourse with the boy, saying they only went to Broadway shows, restaurants, and museums, the same grooming practices Mr. Shanak used to use on his victims. In June of 2015, a female student had approached English teacher David Lowe requesting him for extra credit. From there, the two switched over to email. Mr. Lowe would ask her things like, "How did you look when you were younger? The same? Different? How did you look when you first entered high school? I remember the first day when you walked up to me." Mr. Lowe invited the girl to a Flo Rida concert, pressured her into meeting him outside his school, and begged for workout photos. In July of 2016, the student grew concerned about the incessant messaging, leading to investigators discovering these emails and texts. But he wasn't arrested nor charged with anything. Instead, he resigned in July of 2016, being no longer eligible for future employment in New York City schools. So, what can we learn from Stephen Ostrin, Michael Conte, Sean Shanak, Marissa Kazanave, and David Lowe? First of all, they're all predators. They deserve nothing but the worst. But schools need to do a better job at vetting their employees, or at least take these concerns seriously. If hiring officials had only asked how old Devontae was at the time of the assault, Mr. Shanak would have probably never been hired at our school. Schools need to do a better job with communicating these situations over. Brooklyn Tech never once addressed them when I was there, and they continue to still not address them to this day. In January of 2020, a 15-year-old girl found herself in a relationship with an extremely abusive boyfriend who seemed to relish in causing extreme fear. The older boyfriend coerced her into taking hundreds of nudes, threatening to release them to other students if she resisted. In September of 2021, she realized they now shared a class together. Having enough, she finally told a guidance counselor, who, instead of reporting it to the police, decided to simply change her class schedule. The abuser's sole punishment was to write an apology letter. No suspension, no disciplinary action, and they gave the girl no benefit by telling her she would have had to switch schools to avoid him, not the other way around. The abuser didn't deny any of the allegations. The school helped cover up the crime by telling him to delete the CP from his phone, in turn, making it harder for the NYPD to charge him of a crime. The carelessness of Brooklyn Tech's officials allowed this abuser to call the girl a liar, and when graffiti was tagged in the school labeling the abuser scum, school officials claimed the female student was somehow responsible. The girl's family had to take matters into their own hands, ultimately suing the school and the DOE for negligence. But the boy's lawyer argued that this was a years-long smear campaign against the boy on allegations that he did not deny. And disturbingly, both students remained at the school. Our school's dumbassery shouldn't deter you from making a report, but for my research, I'd highly recommend going to the police before you go to any school officials. It's never too late to speak up and get your story out there. It takes just one voice to start a conversation. If Mr. Shanak wasn't reported by that one student, he would have continued to victimize girls well into my senior year and beyond. And that's a disturbing thought to have. To put it simply, the school needs to do a better job of creating an environment where students feel comfortable telling their stories and believe they will be supported by the school. The Brooklyn Tech Survey published an article detailing how we could work on these issues by implementing workshops that explore topics of consent and showing students how to respond if they ever experience an assault. Brooklyn Tech's seen a serious amount of sexual misconduct violations over the years. It's sadly what we became known for in the 2010s. But there's an even deeper rooted issue within the system itself, and it all stems from the entrance exam.
May 17th marked 65 years since the Supreme Court decided in Brown versus Board of Education that in public schools, separate but equal is not equal. Still, segregation in schools remains a major issue in cities across the nation. And New York City has one of the most segregated school systems in the country. Here's the story.
New York City has a system of specialized high schools that you can only get into by passing an entrance exam, an extremely flawed system that's been widely criticized since the early 1960s. To get a great education, you either had to be extremely gifted or pay thousands of dollars for tutoring. And that's not to say other schools weren't great, but clearly, we were just better.
So we're still smiling, waiting for the picture. Oh, it's a video, guys. It's a video.
And I'm glad you did it out here and not in the restaurant. Because I would have to hurt you in the restaurant.
The entrance exam cannot be bought, it cannot be coerced, and it cannot be changed. It's up to the students to prepare themselves to get in, which has led to an issue of systemic racism. In 2024 alone, students that were Black or Hispanic had close to a 5% chance of getting in, as opposed to the 50% coming from Asian families or the 25% from white folks. Students of our school have called for a system of reform. They voiced their concerns about wanting more Black and Latino students, which all starts from funding more middle schools. Like me, a lot of other students paid a hefty price for tutoring, and as diverse as our school was, it's still heavily segregated, and this topic has been a controversial one for the past few years. Mayor Bill de Blasio's son, Dante, had spoken up about the racism he faced at Brooklyn Tech, coming from both his peers and teachers alike. And Bill has since tried to abolish the exam, hoping to integrate the specialized high schools only for the city's most gifted students, so that it's technically more inclusive all around. In December of 2018, Asian American parents brought a lawsuit against Mayor Bill de Blasio, calling this new bill anti-Asian, which upholds the model minority myth and brushes away the larger issue of underfunded schools in predominantly Black and Latino neighborhoods. Whether they decide to abolish it or not, it doesn't address the fact that very few of these students are accepted into these schools. So, the best way to start is by funding gifted and talented programs in school districts that have historically been known to fail the exam.
Parents rallying at Queensborough Hall outside of a community forum. They say while they agree with the mayor's motive, they disagree with his method. Bernard Thompson is a Brooklyn Tech graduate.
I don't think the real debate is whether or not there should be an exam. I think the debate is that all kids should be prepared equally to do well on that exam.
Unfortunately, a lot of the students at Brooklyn Tech face discrimination, especially the Black students who had it the roughest. Remarks would be made about their skin color, their intelligence. They were often called slurs, and they were seen as violent or lazy, even though they passed the entrance exam just like all of us. Oftentimes, teachers and guidance counselors also made racist remarks. There was a time when my geometry teacher referred to me as a terrorist. Some would regurgitate Fox News talking points, they'd laugh in the faces of Black students, and worst of all, this wasn't just a small issue. It was institutionalized.
With a hashtag linking stories of racism students say they face at one of the city's elite high schools.
It's been an accumulation of like microaggressions that we face, or just like flat out racist remarks that we face, not just by students but also by faculty.
In January of 2016, hashtag Black in Brooklyn Tech became a way for Black students of our school to express their grievances with the racism going on. They'd speak about the slurs, the messages they saw sprawled across the walls, the group chats, the constant bigotry, and the way they were treated by fellow students, the teachers, guidance counselors, and the deans.
Many of the stories posted online include quotes. attributed to other students or teachers, such as, quote, at least slaves could sit down and eat with their masters. Guidance counselor, the day you get above a 90 average, I'll grow an afro. Quote, you're so smart for a black person.
It's a little alarming when, you go on Facebook and, these younger students are, somewhat crying out for help and reaching out to us to, show up in numbers.
Real shit, bro. It was just bad for them. And the crazy part is, our school had a huge black population from the 70s to the 90s. Most of the alumni from that generation are just disappointed in how things have turned out.
Wednesday night, about 200 alumni met with administrators to discuss what the school is doing to address the issue. Many alumni were particularly concerned that the percentage of black students has plummeted at the school. 20 years ago, close to 40% of the students at Brooklyn Tech were black. Now it's 8%.
This is what amazes me because I never experienced any of this when I was going here. Not one iota.
At the same time, white students, mostly Russian and Eastern European, raised the hashtag white in Brooklyn Tech to mock the stories shared online of their fellow black classmates, with some facing no disciplinary action for their disgusting remarks. When they say racism still exists, it does. And I want you to realize that these are your future doctors. They're your future engineers. They're your future teachers. They're going to carry this resentment over to the next generation. And the only way to stop it is by addressing these issues inside the school.
Now, a few weeks after the Black in Brooklyn Tech hashtag went viral, the school says it suspended several students, required every teacher go through sensitivity training, and begun planning ways to recruit and prepare more black middle school students to gain admission. Meanwhile, the principal has been meeting with student groups about the school's issues, and all complaints against staff members are being investigated by the city. And as of Wednesday, Brooklyn Tech has an official corrective action plan in place for how to deal with racism, hate speech, and how to become a more inclusive community.
Just to give you an idea of how racist some of the students were, in 2017, 2 students poured alcohol over a sleeping homeless man, mocked his accent, and then posted all that over Snapchat. Yeah, you guys want to be fucking known, right? When called out by fellow students, the administration did nothing as it was outside the bounds of the school. Brooklyn Tech has yet to solve this issue. When the 6th floor boys' bathroom opened up after 5 years, someone decided to just graffiti slurs all over the stalls. Recently, in January of 2020, anti-Semitic and racist remarks were found scribbled throughout the staircase and on a wet toilet paper, which was unsurprising news to the students there, who claim stuff like this happens every year.
The hunt is on for the person or persons who scribbled vicious words inside a boys' restroom at Brooklyn Tech High. The racist and anti-Semitic messages so alarming that the school's principal temporarily blocked students from using the restrooms.
Brooklyn Tech is, if not, one of the most flawed high schools in American history. A prestigious school with an incredibly dark past. And as criminal as our history is, we're not all terrible people, okay? There's a reason why students work so hard to get into Brooklyn Tech. And it's because our learning environment creates some of the most brilliant minds out there. If you go through our alumni foundation, its people will become world-renowned scientists, engineers, doctors, lawyers, CEOs. If you ever watched The Godfather, The Longest Yard, or $1 Million Baby, you've watched a movie produced by a tech alumni. Have you ever used a digital camera or unlocked your phone with your face? A tech student was somehow behind that. Have you ever watched Pokemon? Ash Ketchum was voiced by an 18-year-old Brooklyn Tech graduate. Have you ever bought a book from Barnes & Noble or a video game from GameStop? A Brooklyn Tech student just wanted books to be more accessible. And now we have $2 billion industries because of it. Even recently, our students have been making headlines for being young inventors. We've had students try to harvest energy with floor tiles. One of my classmates created an app to help other students ace their SAT and ACT exams. And even just recently, one of our students made the news for his video explaining the concept of antimatter.
So today, Brooklyn Tech is a part of the national walkout for gun violence and for gun control and gun reform. So the school will be walking out at about 10 o'clock. People are already starting to come out.
We're out here to protest Congress's lack of action against banning assault rifles in the face of the Parkland shooting.
I feel strongly.
I mean, schools should be a safe place. It's not a place where fear is allowed. Thank you.
Along with the revolving door of young talent, our school has been featured on multiple projects over the years, with a good portion of them being made by Spike Lee. Across the street from us was Spike Lee's home and studio. If you were lucky enough, you might have even seen him during your time there.
Performance today. How about everybody put your hands together for the Brooklyn Tech Internet Cheerleaders?
Now we heard through the grapevine that this team, not these specific dancers, but the Lady Dragons played a part in teaching Riri something? How is that possible?
Okay, ladies. From TRL, MTV,
Oh,
they did
yes.
a high school week.
Oh my gosh.
And she came and learned how to step from organized chaos and the Lady Dragons. So you can see there's the Lady Dragons there. Some of those Lady Dragons, I was actually their coach.
Stop it
Some
right
of them, yeah.
now,
Yes.
Miss Ramona.
How did she do, Riri?
She did all right.
I mean, she looked
I mean,
good
she's
doing it.
Rihanna.
Right. We're hoping that she's gonna like come back and do it again every
okay.
year.
You never
every
know.
year.
If you ever watched the movie School Days with Morpheus and Gus Fring, our Brooklyn Tech cheerleading squad was used in parts of the shoot. The entire music video for The Butt was filmed inside of Brooklyn Tech. You can recognize the cafeteria, the staircases, and the first floor. Lastly, if you ever saw the movie He Got Game, Jesus Shuttlesworth or Ray Allen played basketball at our first floor gym. So technically, we helped LeBron win the 2013 Miami Heat championship. If you ever watched the show Gotham, the police academy is literally just our school. They barely changed any of it, and they even kept our slogan, Home of the Engineers, for the scene with the boxing ring. Also, the first episode of the show, The Tomorrow People, is filmed mostly in Brooklyn Tech. You can see some of our classrooms, the hallways, our football team even makes an appearance. Our school was vastly popular to use as a set piece. There's a show on Netflix called Grand Army that's loosely based off Brooklyn Tech. It's like East Coast Euphoria, but with some darker themes. The first episode is legitimately about a bomb going off. They were not trying to be subtle about it. None of it was filmed inside of our school. However, most sources do claim Brooklyn Tech inspired the show, and the cast basically confirmed it in an interview with the New York Post. The show was canceled after one season, which sucks, but it explored topics most shows choose to brush away from. I won't get into too much of the spoilers here, but it does represent a lot of things we discussed in this video. It's about 5 teenagers in the largest public high school trying to make it work while everything falls apart around them in just various different ways. I highly recommend it even if it's just for that one season. Besides us being representatives for the worst problems in high school, we've also made a few additions to Urban Dictionary. You can search up Brooklyn Tech right now, and it's just people shitting on our school. There's no good reviews. It's mostly people already in our school just shitting on our name. For good reason too, I mean, you've watched this video. To quote, "It has an insane amount of stairs," which is matched only by the amount of idiots there. We did come up with 2 definitions though. Anal shard, I'm not making that up, and engineer's eye. Your standards for female attractiveness are substantially lowered after attending Brooklyn Tech for a good period of time. You can use it in a sentence like, Michelle took a cardboard cutout of Danny DeVito to prom. Talk about a serious case of engineer's eye. This refers to the person who has a strange obsession with Danny DeVito, filling up her locker with Danny DeVito pictures. Look, I'm not going to defend anybody in this situation, because my friends and I all had another obsession. And that comes with the secret third term, Tim spotting.
You got double Tims!
Someone out there just had years of memories shoot back at them at once. Tim spotting is not a real word, but a thing my friends and I all started doing in 2016. Every day, we would spot someone wearing Tims, and everything just came naturally after. The game? Take a picture of only the Tims and post where you spotted them.
Brother, look at the tongue. Oh my God, look at the tongue. Oh, brother. Nah.
This has led to Tim's on the beach, giant Tim's, Tim's in memes, Tim's in weddings, Tim's in the classrooms, Tim's on the subway, Tim's in the stadium, the Pokemon Tim attack, Jadakiss doing pull-ups with some Tim's. What I'm trying to say is, my friends and I all started something from the lunchrooms of Brooklyn Tech, and we slowly garnered a damn cultural movement. It's up to you now to do with that information what you must. But there's exactly one thing that our school is best known for. One image that I guarantee most of you have seen if you just spent a little bit of time online. In 2016, 4 juniors at Brooklyn Tech took a photo on the 5th floor, unknowingly becoming the face of teen hypebeasts ever since. They became known as the Supreme Fuckboys, the Travis Scott Burger Guys, the dudes who tweet Young Boy better and say they wouldn't rat like 6ix9ine. For the past decade, they've been dragged through all corners of the internet. They've become a period piece, one that perfectly encapsulates what Brooklyn Tech was all about. Fake Asian hypebeasts. And now, my friends, is where we go into the bathroom. A warning for those of you with a weak stomach, please keep watching. Brooklyn Tech is many things, and you may be asking yourself, why am I talking about the bathrooms? Because it'd be a disservice to my fellow classmates if I were to leave this out. Whenever we see a high school bathroom being destroyed, we think of it as competition. To quote a Redditor, they don't know how we get it though. As I said, the 6th floor boys' bathroom wasn't made available until my senior year. And before I even set foot into the school, I knew the bathrooms were going to be a problem. I saw photos of the toilet fires, I heard of students bringing desks into the bathrooms, I've seen the graffiti there, but I was surprised to see a pair of goldfish in the sink, and then a dead rat in the toilet. Our school literally just breeds psychopaths. Our bathroom stories are interesting, man. I don't know why I'm talking about them. At one point, kids in our school decided to rave in the bathroom and scream free YSL. I'll have you know, my bathroom friends, Young Thug has been freed. Students in the school decided to give out free haircuts in the bathrooms. They've offered food for the ghosts in the basement. They've even done rituals in the toilets in the hallways. We've engineered new ways to toilet paper our school, becoming a rite of passage done by most boys. There's so many things to say about our school. You truly have to feel for the janitors working there. But don't try anything too dumb. Principal Newman is always watching you. But the kids were that dumb, and Principal Newman was watching. In January of 2019, he enacted a bathroom policy for the boys, only allowing the 1st, 4th, and 7th floor bathrooms to remain open. This caused students to shit their pants, both literally and figuratively. On that same day, a petition was filed to change the bathroom policy, gaining almost 500 verified signatures. The students fled to the outside to protest. They wanted to destroy their bathrooms. They weren't going to let this new policy stop them. To this day, students continue to protest in the bathrooms by lighting the toilets on fire, covering them with trash cans, flooding the floors, and somehow graffitiing the side of the building.
Do not be trampled under the communist boots of David Newman's regime.
Yeah, preach, dog.
Oh, I should mention, Principal Newman is actually pretty liked by most of the students there. He even has a fan club in the school. Mr. Asher always felt like Dan Schneider after the whole Shaynak situation, so, there's that. And, as much as I like to give him shit, the school has some pretty cool and interesting teachers. They're mostly well-liked and well-respected educators.
There's so much life going on in there, from the students to the fish to the plants are everywhere. You seem like you're taking a step outside the school and walking into a whole different place. And that whole different place is cultivated by Dr. Margarita. Brooklyn Technical High School is currently the 2nd-ranked school in New York City and the 2nd-ranked school in New York State. We are the largest STEM high school in the world with over 6,000 students.
Every student looks back and they contact me and tell me what an impact that made, because they were tree blind before the study, and then after they can identify so many trees. So they are always looking at the tree, and gives them a time to really stop and think about what's happening in nature and how it connects to their life once again.
Look, man, this is gonna sound weird, but there was a masturbation club at our school with a penis inspector that marked down the tallies in the stalls. They caused the stall to go out of order due to excessive semen overload. I'm not here to defend them, nor am I here to glorify this. Our school was just different, okay? We had too many dumb people all here at one time. You can pack the smartest kids into one school, and all you'll have are the memories of the stupid shit you used to pull. It's stupid to say, but that's what made our school so enjoyable. We were chaotic, but in the smartest sense of that word. Everyone there knew we had to graduate. We all had to get through this hell together. Our workload was tough, so we had to let it out in the dumbest ways imaginable. And the bathrooms are a clear representation of that. You've seen our bathrooms before, and don't act like you haven't. In February of 2016, a Twitter user posted this image with the caption, "Who the fuck brings a bag of chopped red onions to school just to throw them in the toilet? I fucking hate my school." That was our most viral bathroom moment. We finally made it onto BuzzFeed. Our school had made it to the big leagues, baby. We were there. And we were going to recreate that feeling no matter what. We've since thrown bananas, limes, pineapples, eggplants, and a bunch of other food. But we haven't mimicked that original success. When I stepped into Brooklyn Tech, I didn't think I'd be making a video about it a decade later. Nor did I think I'd be finding all this crazy shit. But there's something to say when I can make a 2-hour long video about my former high school. It was different. We've had too many incidents to count. Too many fires, too many bomb threats, too many robberies, too many deaths, too many pedo teachers, too many bathroom incidents. There's something about Brooklyn Tech that's just special. Or it's just me, and I'm reminiscing about memories. As I said, I'm not here to shit on the students or any of the staff there. But it's wild that all of this has gone down under one roof. All these stories, all these characters, all these incidents that have come from one high school.
Yo, I'm next to Brooklyn Tech right now. Hurricane Sandy went in. Yo, you see this shit, yo? Wow. Fort Greene Park right there, y'all see it? Oh, shit, this shit is crazy. Damn. 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 Nah, Hurricane Sandy, that shit fucked a lot of shit up. A word.
Brooklyn Tech should be one of the most notorious high schools in America, but yet, I think of it fondly. It's a great school. You'll get the finest of education, but you'll meet the dumbest of gifted people. I'm not here to say my school was all bad. Despite the title of this video, the crimes do not represent us. Everyone at Tech is capable of doing great things.
And just a few minutes ago, the kids who were here got a huge treat. Susan Sarandon came by and signed a bunch of the tables here. She grew up in New York, and she actually co-owns a ping pong social club called Spin Club. And with the help of Stiga, the manufacturer of these ping pong tables, she donated 16 ping pong tables to the school. She signed some of them as well.
To the ones who graduated, what a ride, huh? To the ones currently going there, good luck on that journey. And to the ones thinking of going there, don't. Now, why'd I make this video? I didn't have any other ideas, but besides that, there was a story to tell. A story that could have been lost to time. But there's something to learn here. I just don't know what it is. Now, if you got to this part of the video, I want you to know that Stuyvesant fucking sucks. They can't pull off what we do here at Brooklyn Tech. If you're really thinking about going here, by all means, please do. It's a great school with some great people. But as you can tell, it does have its problems. And I know I cheesed it with the title, Brooklyn Tech never covered up these crimes. They just never cared to announce it.
Go, go, go! Go!
Research your schools, research your teachers. There's probably some crazy stories out there that you might have. Who knows, maybe your school is more insane than ours. We're just a drop in the bucket in the thousands of schools out there. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe for more quality content, and please don't harass anyone from Tech or me. If you find me, no you didn't. I don't fucking know you. Thank you for coming to my Tech Talk.
I'm for green, I'm for green, I'm for green, yeah. I'm from Fort Greene. I'm from Fort Greene. I'm from Fort Greene. It's rap like a mummy, cause I'm the no